Hey, what's going on? I'm Ryan Glick, co-founder and CEO of Groove. And if you're a real estate professional, I have something I think you're going to be interested in. We've developed a platform that's transforming the way deals are prospected and managed in the real estate world. With Groove, you can organize real estate data in one place and share real estate deals with just one click. Join other real estate pros and reclaim up to 90% of your time. Head over to letsgroove.com/signup and start your free trial today.
Do you ever ask yourself, how would my life be different if I had made different choices? Would I be happier? More wealthy? Here's a humorous novel that explores that question, venturing back to that magical time in the early 90s when grunge was taking over big hairbands. It was just when our hero, Amy Gare, began to face the real world. You Hawkeye fans just might enjoy the setting as well. Goodbye Def Leppard, I'll Miss Those Jeans by Steph Kramer can be found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and it's free for Kindle Unlimited subscribers. Chasmium believes every young athlete deserves a shot at greatness. By making data analytics accessible and easy, they provide a new way for coaches and athletes to improve their game. Chasmium's digital scoring app, all-in-one stats, and chart software enable teams to quickly and easily find new ways to strategize and harness the power of data. Join Chasmium in revolutionizing the world of youth sports with tools that make a difference. Schedule a software demo or sign up today at chasmium.com. Chasmium, where sports technology sparks victory. A big thank you to Chasmium and to Def Leppard. That's actually Steph Kramer. I shouldn't be thanking the rock band Def Leppard, but Steph Kramer's book. I'm actually in the middle of reading that book here through a very busy fall football season. And of course, our friends over at Groove as well. We appreciate everybody being a part of this as we recap Iowa football's 29-13 victory over the Maryland Terrapins. I'm your host, Corey Brada, here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, and this is our post-game coverage. We do not have Coach Patterson with us today. Coach Patterson is calling a game on television for the Missouri Valley Conference, so we will be doing a two-part post-game show this week. So we'll have a special part 2 edition of this very show tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Central Time. But we're here at least for the next hour to 2 hours to talk with you. I'll be joined by a good friend of mine, Kyle Spence, here in a few minutes as well. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. Here's how this works. Super chat comments get priority, and no guarantees we get to everybody's comments, but we will get to your super chat if you leave one here on YouTube. Again, we're broadcasting, we're actually simulcasting on our YouTube channel from the Hawkeye of the Storm, as well as our sister channel, Iowa Football, at the Voice of College Football, thanks to our good friend Mark Rogers over at the Voice of College Football Network. And, of course, we have our great sponsors to thank for being here. And our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line is open. So if you want to call in and chat or ask a question, you can certainly do that. As you see the Iowa Smokehouse bottom ticker here. And the number to call in, folks, is 515-635-1601. 515-635-1601. Or you can join via StreamYard. I did throw the link up in the description. I'll also throw it up in the live chat as we speak. All right, let's, before I get to kind of my general observations from Iowa's somewhat routine victory in College Park, let's go to our first caller. OS for Hawks is with us in our Iowa Smokehouse line. Welcome, sir.
Really? I'm number one?
Yeah, I figured you'd like that. I just wanted to throw you a bone. I wanted to, normally I have to give my dialogue and kind of go off on my own spiel, but I wanted to throw you a bone today, so enjoy it while you have it.
Wow, I feel so fortunate. I agree with a couple people in chat. I think Drew Stevens maybe has to be the MVP of the game today. That was quite something. A couple of things I wanted to bring up. I thought Stratton played a very good game. I thought he was solid. Just the one handoff to Kamari Moulton at one time on that turnover. I don't even know if that was that. I'm not blaming Stratton.
Yeah, I don't think that was on him at all, frankly.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Yep. One thing for sure that I wanted to bring up is on the pass play to Bowie by Stratton, and Bowie didn't even look like he was looking for the ball. Yep. And I guess my question is how are you a wide receiver in a red zone area running a slant? How are you not looking for the football? That's my question.
Well, I mean, my only response to that is it's split-second timing, right? I mean, I'm guessing his head was going to come around maybe I think it did come around about a half second late. I'd have to go back and watch that replay. But
it came around right when the ball was there.
Yeah. Well, then there's the split second, and they say a game of inches to a game of split seconds. And Jackson didn't play a perfect game, right? I mean, I thought the play on second down was I think it was third or fourth quarter where he goes second and short, and he's got an opportunity to run for an easy first down. And he tries to toss it off to Zach Ortworth or one of the tight ends.
Yeah.
And he knew it as soon as he did it. I mean, he's a smart kid. He's an intelligent guy.
Yep.
And I know this storyline. Everybody wants to play up the fact that he's a fourth-string walk-on. But, I've talked about him in the past. This kid was committed to Washington initially out of high school. So it's not like he's some total slouch. It's not like he earned a spot via tryouts at Kinnick one day. No, this is a kid that has an arm. And I don't know if he's any part of the future for Iowa long-term. But I thought Tim Lester called a terrific game that fit the situation. And as you heard me say in my preview, this was the perfect game for a guy like Stratton to begin his career, so to speak, as a starter, because this is a Maryland defense ranked bottom of the conference in pass defense. They were okay against the run. Obviously, Caleb Johnson got his today, but I thought this was a good place to start. And there was nobody at SECU Stadium out in College Park. That place was bare.
Yeah, it was very bad. I don't like to pick on people per se, but I have to say something about the commentators today.
Okay.
We had Jazzy and Peterson.
I heard that. Yep.
and we had Cajun Wheatland playing in the game.
Well, there's a no. Let me correct you on
But
that.
it was Weejan on the play, and they called him Cajun Wheatland.
Well, no. Let me miss. There is a Caleb Wheatland that plays for Maryland, and he tackled Caden Weegan. He got called for the face mask on Caden Weegan, but it was
All right.
Caleb Wheatland
Okay.
that made the tackle.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, that was a weird. I made the comment.
Okay.
Caleb Wheatland just face masked Caden Weegan. It was kind of a
Yeah.
weird series of events, but that did happen.
But the commentators also said that Jamari Harris is injured.
Well, they also called him Jeremiah Harris, but so we can get into that controversy if you want. I know that a lot of that happened yesterday, and I was on my way to Kansas City for the basketball game. But Iowa did release a statement yesterday to a couple different media outlets, and that's through Iowa's PR people, through the communications department, basically saying that Jeremiah did not travel with the team, just like Cade didn't travel with the team, both due to medical reasons. But Jeremiah has not opted out through the rest of the season. They hope to get both of those guys back next week. Now, I know a couple of the people in the Iowa media who will remain nameless because I'm not going to pick on them. I don't know if who their sources are, what their sources are.
Okay.
They have doubled down on those initial reports that Jeremiah is opting out through the rest of the year. I have not reached out to anybody. Frankly, I don't really have a Jeremiah source, to be quite frank, and I've not reached out to anybody within the program that I care to badger about that. But it sounds like maybe we'll find this out here in the next week. If Jeremiah isn't on the sidelines for the Iowa game next Saturday, or next Friday, which will be at Kinnick, then I think it's obvious, even if he doesn't release a statement, that he opted out. I can't imagine, opting out. There's to me, a big difference between opting out after the end of the regular season and opting out before the end of the regular season. I mean, guys are doing this before bowl games every which place nowadays. But if Jeremiah opted out before next Friday's game, one would almost have to think he's not even going to be in the sidelines. Because I don't know that. Jeremiah has seemed like a really high character kid. I know he's had an up and down career with a variety of things, but I got a lot of respect for Jeremiah Harris. I was surprised when I read that report, but I also can't give that report credibility because I don't know. I just know Iowa's refuting the idea that he's opting out at this point.
Yeah, no, I just imagine social media being wrong on something. Huh?
Well, I mean,
I know, and I don't want to make it controversial or not.
For the record, there were Iowa beat writers reporting this yesterday.
Yes, so, I know. Yeah, I saw that.
And the rumors were flying about Cade all week, right?
Yeah.
Cade's quit the team, yada yada yada. And I said on my preview, nobody has said that to me, and I don't even know where that started. But that I never had a question. There was no reason to believe that Cade had quit the team. Now he may not want to play, but based on what he said publicly yesterday, he does want to play. So, hey, I don't know that it really matters at this point. You got one game left. You'd love to win. I don't think that Nebraska team is very good. I don't know that they need Cade versus Jackson. Frankly, again, this was a game against a Maryland defense that's not going to really test the arm or legs of a guy like Stratton or Cade. But did you see a whole lot of difference when we saw it from quarterback play, QB1 to the beginning of the season to QB4 today? I didn't. But I know opponent certainly has a lot to do with that. And I thought Tim Lester, he called a really, really solid game given the situation.
Yeah, and here's my feeling I have in my notes here from the way Stratton played today. In my opinion, Stratton should be QB1 going forward. That's my opinion, but that's the only opinion. I do have one last thing that I would like you to ask Coach.
Okay.
And it has to do with the Felton touchdown, the second Felton touchdown where he ran it to the pylon, and Wampa was playing safety, and I'm having brain fade, who was playing corner number 2.
TJ
Hall. And they ran something where Felton flared, the outside receiver went in, TJ Hall went with him, and Wampa was way, and that's if Felton got an easy catch for a touchdown. I just wanted to, I don't know, I'm not a big defensive guy, but I wondered what kind of defense they were in and why that was so open. I mean, it's Felton, for crying out
Right.
loud. How do you let the number one receiver in a situation like that be that wide open? That's
Yeah, and it seems like that's what I'd have to go back and watch that play again myself, and certainly we'll talk to Coach about that tomorrow night. But that play is almost a microcosm of some of that defense's problems all year. There's been a lot of that this year. I mean, go back to UCLA, go back to the second half against Iowa State. You kind of expect. It didn't shock me when Iowa State did it because they got great wideouts and a really good quarterback, and they're always good through the air. But when you saw Michigan State and UCLA get success again, even Washington for a good portion of that game, they were going up and down the field on those Iowa DBs. And it's not just the DBs. Believe me, the defensive line, obviously, go back and watch the game out in L.A. That was a horrendous performance from that D-line. But that's been almost a storyline. It just seems like guys are just in the open field exponentially more than we are used to seeing with any Phil Parker-led defense. And I came into this year thinking that this DB group was as strong as it's ever been, even though they lost Cooper DeJean, because you felt like Xavier was going to take a step forward. You get a really experienced safety in Quinn Schulte back. You get a high upside guy in Entringer back. Then you got, three guys competing for one spot and a rock on the other side in Jamari. Now, Jamari did not play today, obviously, but it's kind of been a microcosm of some of their struggles defensively.
Anyway, it's been a pleasure, Corey. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I like being number one. That was kind of nice.
Number one. Appreciate it, sir.
Have a good day. Yep.
Thanks for the call. All right, folks. Yes, I've had a couple of people ask me, hey, player of the game. Well, without question, in my mind, I think people can predict that this was going to be the final result. RTI Threads player of the game is none other than Drew Stevens, 5 of 5. And man, that dude looks like an NFL kicker. I'm going to continue to double down on that stance that Drew Stevens is an NFL kicker. He's had several kicks this year of over 50 yards that have narrowly, by the slimmest of margins, missed. I believe he had, and maybe that one counted. I'm trying to think of the one that went over one of the uprights early in the year. They may have counted that one, but I know he had one that doinked off one of the uprights. He had another one that just narrowly missed wide. All his kicks have plenty of distance. And it's funny. I know Coach Patterson's fought me a little bit on this whenever I bring up the notion that Drew's kicks could be good from 70 at times. It's funny. One of the BTN guys today made that statement. That'd have been good from 70. Now, he was kicking with a tailwind on, I think, almost all of these tries, at least the long ones. But he's 5 of 5 field goals today, 26, 27, 49, 50, and 54. And there was one of those longer ones that was starting to get close to one of the uprights. But boy, the other two were 1,000% pure and true. And I think 2 of those 3 would have been good from 65. Legitimately, like they weren't moving any substantial amount. And there was a lot of wind. There was a little bit of crosswind. It was obviously a tailwind, but there was a little bit of side-to-side motion there. But he just did a tremendous job controlling those long kicks. He kicks everything the same way. He had a tackle today. I guess maybe we should add that to the I know that was brought up during the broadcast as well. Let's go ahead and add that to the the list, because he had one tackle there on special teams late, which you don't often see from any kicker. But that was cool to see, and certainly he's had a career day and a career year. It'll be interesting to see what his mindset is next year, because here's a kid, and guys get poached all the time in college football, right? And now that he's gone, I think it's safe to say Torrey Taylor was getting poached. I know of at least one high major blue blood school that was openly offering money, lots of money, to Torrey Taylor to go over there. Remember, Torrey Taylor could not, by rule, make money as an international kicker, right? He comes in from Australia. It's tremendous for Iowa. Now he's playing for the Chicago Bears, making plenty of money. But there were schools actively recruiting him off the Iowa roster. He sticks with Iowa, which applaud him for that. He played by the rules, and now he's getting rewarded in the league. But that's going to happen with Drew Stevens. You just know it is. It's one of those things. And I'm not saying he's going to be exploring his options, but I do wonder, given the year he's had, what the incentives are for a kicker to leave school early. He's got a huge leg. He doesn't need to get as many more leg strength. I don't know what benefit there is in him sticking around if his numbers are high enough to where he's not going to better his draft stock. If he believes he's going to be drafted as a kicker, which is hard to do, all right, that is hard to get drafted, just like it's hard to get drafted as a punter. Torrey Taylor proved it's possible, but it's hard to do. If Drew Stevens gets feedback and they say, hey, you're going to be drafted in the 5th round, or maybe he goes higher than that. I don't know. I don't know where great kickers typically get drafted. When's the last time Iowa's had a kicker drafted? I don't know. Was Nate Kading drafted? Marshall Kane wasn't drafted. He had a big leg, but not quite as accurate. Had some issues with extra points, I believe, back in 2015, I believe it was. So anyways, I'm kind of going off on my own tangent, but I am curious what the incentives for a guy like Stevens are for him to stick around for another year. I do know Drew's younger brother, Jack Stevens, is kicking up at South Dakota State. Iowa did recruit Jack. Sounds like they wanted him in as a walk-on, and Jack has been waiting his turn this year for the Jacks, but my guess is he'll take over as a full-time starter next year. Not that that affects Drew's life, but they got a couple of good kicker kids in that family between Jack and Drew, and both kids have big legs, and Drew is kicking as well as he has at Iowa. And again, even the misses he had earlier this year, the kicks in general looked good, right? We very rarely wince when you see a kick from Drew Stevens. All his kickoffs are really solid. He's a touchback professor, if you will, and he was phenomenal. Again, 5 of 5 with his kicks, field goal kicks, 2 of 2 extra points, and had a tackle. And kicks from 49, 50, and 54. Drew Stevens is our RTI Threads player of the game. Folks, if you are new here, be sure you give a special thank you, if you can, by making a purchase over to our friends over at Iowa Smokehouse. Yes, they are with us throughout football season. They've been with us. They'll continue to stay with us through the remainder of the season. Be sure you get your orders in. They've got great snacking options for the NBA season, the college basketball season, men's and women's, NFL season. You need everything they have over here at Iowa Smokehouse. It's all delicious between their summer sausage and their beef sticks, their steak bites. It's all amazing. Yes, tasting is believing. Find out how that's the case over at iowasmokehouse.com and use that code Hawkeyes for 15% off. Folks, when the season's over and this promotion is no longer running, that deal will go away. So get your orders in today, because here's the deal. You got 1 week left of the regular season. So we have not announced an end hour of this promotion, but this is not guaranteed. This rate is not guaranteed. This discount is not guaranteed long term. So get your orders in now. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your total order at iowasmokehouse.com and find out how tasting is believing. Also, Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm. We certainly appreciate Brad. He's with us through men's basketball season as well, and he's been with us for several years. Give him a call for a free quote on auto insurance, homeowners insurance, life insurance, etc. Call him at 515-256-6480. That's 515-256-6480. Or visit him online, bradvanmeter.com. His office is down on Fleur Drive in Des Moines. Again, that's Brad Van Meter with State Farm in Des Moines. And, of course, we mentioned RTI Threads, but if you're not familiar with RTI Threads and the great work they're doing over in Western Iowa, but they are a big part of Hawkeye football and the NIL incentives with these kids, these young athletes, Aaron Graves, Jacob Gill, Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer, Cooper DeJean, Peyton Sanford, Owen Freeman. Owen had a big game last night down at the T-Mobile Center. You can shop RTI Threads at rtithreads.com. Use the /NIL, and we'll show you the website here in a few minutes, because quite the selection. And even if you're a fan of some other teams, they've got a number of options, but a big supporter of Hawkeye Athletics. rtithreads.com. And, of course, your purchases not only benefit the athletes and RTI Threads, sponsor of the show, but you benefit this show by being involved and making a purchase through our wonderful sponsors. Again, that's www.rtithreads.com. All right, folks, our phone line is wide open right now. How about this? I don't know that I've ever said that in the first hour, 2 hours of this very show. So let's go ahead and throw this number up. I haven't even gotten the phone number up on the bottom ticker. So let's go and do this. We've got some openings here. I hope my phone line is working okay. 515-635-1601. 515-635-1601, or you can click the StreamYard link in our description. All right, let me run through some notes of mine as I was watching this game today. Of course, Iowa in the first quarter, you knew they were going to come out relatively conservative, and they stayed that way throughout the game. As long as they could avoid being behind, control the field. I made the comment on social media pregame that this game was in line to be the type of game where not only is Tim going to be able to kind of rein things in with a first game starter in Jackson Stratton, but it's going to make for a really boring game. All right. And I think maybe that's why we don't have too many callers here early, because here's a game. This team's already got 4 losses. They're out of contention for the Big Ten championship. They're out of contention for the 12-team playoff. You're at College Park. There's no crowd out there. Iowa's down to their 4th string quarterback. And then on top of that, given the fact that they're playing their 4th string quarterback, Kirk is just looking to get a win. That's who Kirk is anyways. He's not trying to run the score up. So when they're up 3-0 and 6-0 and whatever it was, 13-3 down the stretch, or 16-6, whatever it was, they have a 4th and 1 and a 4th and half a yard. You're going to punt. You're going to see lots of punts, and give Kirk credit. He got out of there with the win. You knew once they got on top by 2 scores, barring some miracle, even though that defense has had a bugaboo this year with giving up big pass plays at times and letting wideouts get in open space. And hey, Maryland's got a really good wideout in number 10 who's going to play on Sundays here very soon. It was going to take a lot with how well Iowa was running the ball and how Iowa dominated field position in this game for Maryland to complete that comeback. So once Kirk got on top and really controlled that field for at least 2.5 quarters, you knew that was basically going to sink Maryland's chances. I thought first quarter, Jackson Stratton came out composed. I believe he completed at least his first 4 passes. He did take a sack on a play-action play in that first quarter. Iowa was actually down in the red zone, had driven the ball down the field on their first possession of the game. He takes a snap, and the color guy for BTN made the point that, as a young guy in Jackson Stratton, off that play action, you got to snap your head around a little faster. I thought it was bad pass protection. Obviously, guy comes free rusher up that right side. The line goes left. Jackson rolls right. And there's no way for him to get that ball out. And it was better than taking or trying to get that ball off and either getting a grounding penalty. I don't know that he got out of the pocket. And or he could have thrown a bad interception. He takes the sack. But the problem is the very next play, Iowa was, of course, in field goal range. The very next play, he hands off to Kamari Moulton. And I think that was on Moulton. I know our initial caller brought that play up, that maybe you put that partially on Jackson Stratton for a bad handoff, the bad exchange. To me, it looked like a good breadbasket type of handoff to Kamari Moulton. Moulton drops the ball and then kicks it, and it goes 8 yards down the field. Maryland recovers, and certainly not the start you wanted. Iowa was moving the ball, and then to turn the ball over down in the red zone is difficult. Second quarter, Iowa ends up with a touchdown after a really solid drive that featured a couple different critical down conversions. And I thought that was of note because we saw that last week, 2 weeks ago. Jackson Stratton comes in against UCLA, converts a couple of critical downs, and the dude doesn't seem fazed by big moments. Now, again, UCLA, Maryland, not the biggest of moments, but on the road as a guy who's never really played in this situation, played very little for Colorado State when he was on scholarship there. I thought that was impressive to see. I know he wasn't, the sole reason for those conversions at times, but a couple of 3rd and 4th down conversions made. Let's see, 3rd and 6 inside the Maryland 10, skipping ahead a little bit in that second quarter. Maryland ball, they have an incomplete pass. And let's see here. Actually, we're skipping ahead towards the end of that second quarter. So 3rd and 6 inside the Maryland 10. Iowa has no timeouts. They burn their 2 timeouts on, 2nd and 3rd down. What does Maryland do with about a minute and a half? They're deep in their own territory. They end up deciding to throw, which was a horrible decision because they throw an incomplete pass, end up having to punt with over a minute and a half to go. Very next possession, Iowa goes down the field. A really nice throw from Jackson Stratton to the left hash, or toward the left boundary, I should say. And I thought it was a good throw to Seth Anderson, who tried to catch the over-the-shoulder pass. I thought he could have went up with two hands and grabbed it. And then Stratton takes a bad delay of game penalty, and the Hawks settle for a field goal. But the good news is they have Drew Stevens, who makes a 54-yard field goal, and Iowa has a relatively comfortable lead at the break. Third quarter, Drew Stevens with a 50-yard field goal. Maryland responds with a really impressive touchdown drive. However, it knocked out their quarterback, Billy Edwards, who was already nursing an injury. And they end up with a touchdown. They go for two at that point. You talk about chasing points. Commentators brought that up. Maybe a little too early at that point in the game to be chasing points. But the way Iowa was running the ball, they go for two. They do not get it. It's 16-6 at that point. For ensuing possession, I believe it was ensuing possession, Iowa punts on 4th and 1. And then a little later in that quarter, Drew Stevens, a 49-yard field goal. Actually, I think we're skipped to the fourth quarter. I don't have that in my notes. But Drew Stevens with a 49-yard field goal. And then the fourth quarter, Maryland, 4th and inches, the QB sneak. And you see Kirk angry about the pile pushing. So maybe this was still third quarter. But the only thing I would say about that, and I don't think we've seen Kirk as angry as he was in that moment all year, at least not on the field. Kyler Fisher's pulling a guy off the pile on that 4th down conversion for Maryland, which is illegal, regardless of intentions, regardless of motives. That was brought up in the broadcast as well. So I understand Kirk's frustration because there was back and forth jawing. You have a Maryland guy shove Kyler Fisher well after the whistle, but they're both going at it. And frankly, it wouldn't have made a difference with the conversion because it was after the play. So if anything, Iowa may have caught a break by not getting the initial penalty called on Kyler Fisher. In the end, Iowa and Maryland go back and forth. The Hawkeyes control the game throughout on the ground. Caleb Johnson, of course, breaking the all-time record, I should say, tying the all-time record for tying or breaking. Do we know tying or breaking? I guess I have to find that in my notes here. 21 touchdowns on the season, which is the record. Let me make sure I have this correct here. Let's see. We'll have to find that. Let's go to our first. We got a couple of callers here on the line. Let's go to our Iowa Smokehouse line. Who's on the line?
Yeah, Dick Maloney, 50 Lakes, Minnesota.
Hey, Dick, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm good. Say, long-time listener, Corey, first-time caller. I'm from Esterville, Iowa originally, but I live in northern Minnesota. And myself and Randy and Eric always get together up here and watch the Hawkeye games. And it's been kind of frustrating this year, but
absolutely,
yeah, we really had a good time today. We really enjoyed that Moulton was able to make up for his fumble.
Yeah.
And I just love Ethan Herkett and Llewellyn. I love watching them, especially Ethan Herkett. Just always giving the quarterback a lot of grief out back there. And especially today, with his bad hand, he was going after him every play.
Absolutely.
But anyway, just wanted to call in, and we had a great Hawkeye viewing today, and just wanted to call in first time and go Hawks. We got to beat Nebraska next week.
Well, I appreciate the call, Dick. Thank you for being such an avid supporter of the Hawks and of this show. And let's get a win over the fraudulent black shirts next week.
You bet.
All right. Thanks, Dick. Appreciate the call. Good stuff. Appreciate Dick calling in and his group that's hopefully watching the show up in Minnesota, and did just confirm that. So Caleb Johnson surpassed Sean Green with 21 rushing touchdowns this year, which is a new program record. So Sean Green set the record back in 2008 with 20. And Caleb Johnson with the touchdown, or the 2-yard touchdown run in the second quarter, gives him the record, the program record for most touchdowns, rushing touchdowns in a season. So impressive stuff from Caleb Johnson. All right, let's add in our good friend Kyle Spence, who is with us. Kyle,
how are we doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
What's the word? Apathetic? Or
you're apathetic? Don't be apathetic. 16-point win.
Disconnected. Dismayed.
Debbie Downer. What do you mean? Start calling you Kashin? Just kidding. Just kidding. People have been going after Kashin. My goodness.
I know it's not right. We like our girl Kashin. She brings the heat. She brings the energy.
Absolutely. So a couple things, Kyle. First of all, I mentioned the record for Caleb Johnson. Obviously, a really solid day for him. It wasn't one of his vaunted 3 touchdown performances, but his final stat line, 35 carries, $164 and a touchdown. Of course, broke the record today, averaged almost 5 yards per carry. You have Kamari Moulton with 114 yards, most of which was gained on the 68-yard scamper. They gave him his lone touchdown. But how about these rushing numbers? For the game, 268 yards to Maryland's 98. And so I guess, like the big thing, if we want to play, and we haven't been talking for the last 36 minutes, if we just want to play the game of reality here, it's great. And Iowa won this game the way you'd expect Iowa to win this game with their 4th-string quarterback. But it does, like every game, it just becomes more, it remains confounding why this team has been such a roller coaster all season. It remains confounding. I don't have answers because there are times this year, and now we can kind of start to look back at it. Yeah, one more game in the regular season, you kind of start to reflect, and you're like, they have had games where they have looked every bit as good defensively as they are inherently year after year after year. But then you have moments, and sometimes it's an entire game, sometimes it's a half, sometimes it's 1 quarter, 3 quarters. It's so weird. Iowa State's an example.
Check out. Yeah.
It's like we see a different defense. And Iowa State's an example, although Iowa State, I kind of excused it at the time. And you'll recall, Kyle, that I was very, very critical of Kirk Ferentz because of game management, because of clock management, timeout management, etc. in that game. And maybe we didn't put enough blame on that defense. And not that means Kirk is not to blame for any of that. But some of the same bugaboos that came up in that second half that allowed Iowa State back into that game after trailing 13-0 and not even being able to convert a first down until midway through the second quarter, some of those same bugaboos that came up, reared their ugly heads in the second half, occurred again against Michigan State, occurred against UCLA. Again, we can kind of throw the Ohio State game out the window from that perspective because it's such an outlier just given the opponent. And so then you see a game like tonight, or you go back to the Northwestern game, you go to, even the game against Troy was first game of 2 halves. We talked about inconsistency through the first month. Remember how many weeks did we talk about when is this team going to play a full 60 minutes? And they're still like, it's not the same.
First half of the season, they didn't play 60 minutes. Entire first half of the season, they had maybe one game they played 60 minutes.
It's just such an odd dynamic right now with this program. And it's hard to explain because we're just not used to seeing that level of inconsistency. And today, in general, they were very consistent. Now, they gave up a couple of drives in the second half, but for the most part, when they needed to buckle down, they did. I'm sure there were some fans out there that as they watch those 2 touchdowns for Maryland star wideout there in the second half, they're thinking, uh-oh, here we go. Maryland's going to work their way back into the game. Iowa's not being aggressive enough. They're trying to sit on this win and play not to lose instead of playing to win. But eventually, again, having a run game helps, and they didn't have a run game against UCLA and had a very marginal run game for much of the Michigan State game.
Yeah.
So it's just weird. We'll reflect on this at the end of the season, probably after the bowl game, and I want to break everything down. But just off my memory, all right, and then we'll get to our next caller. Based on my recollection, you tell me if I'm wrong, Kyle. First half against Illinois State, good defense, bad offense. They lead 6-0. Second half, terrific on both sides. They blow them out of the water, right?
Yeah.
Second game against Iowa State, terrific first half, with the exception of being the red zone.
Both sides of the ball. Both sides of the ball.
17-0 or 21-0. Second half, horrendous offense, horrendous defense. They blow the game. Troy the next week, horrible first half.
Horrendous on both sides, yeah.
And mostly defensive. How many big plays you give up to one guy who, by the way, I don't even know what he's done here since then. I'd go look at his stats. Troy's been a mess.
Yeah.
But they come back in the second half, terrific on the ground. Defense battens down the hatchet, so to speak, and they pull away. But again, there's the roller coaster. Minnesota,
first half, they were not great in the first half.
They're down.
They smoked them in the second half.
They come back, smoke them on the ground. Defense locks them down, and they're fine. Ohio State, kind of the same thing in a different situation. They were in that. What was the score at halftime of that game? Wasn't it like
Oh, it was
down 6-0, something like that.
6-0 or 9-0 or something
But
close.
we've seen that. Listen, we've read that.
7-0. It was one score.
We've seen that movie before, though. That is a typical Iowa performance against a really elite offense/defense. They hang in for a half, so that didn't surprise me. Washington, remember the number of times they let Will Rogers, how many yards they give up to Will Rogers in that game, and they buckled down in the red zone.
Yeah.
And so I think at that point in the season, you got 2 losses, one against Iowa State, one against Ohio State. As we're watching that defense against Will Rogers, we're kind of excusing some of that because we're like, well, they stymied up in the red zone and held Washington to field goals and turned them over, and they figured out a way to hold them down. And Iowa won that game like 40-14 or something like that.
40-16, yeah.
40-16, and then the roof comes caving in on you the following week in East Lansing, and from start to finish, the defense is bad. In fact, first half, there was 12-0 at one point. They got 4 field goals, but they're just allowing Michigan State to march up and down the field. Then they bounce back. Northwestern's complete performance against a mediocre Northwestern team. They do the same thing against Wisconsin. You're like, okay, they're rounding into shape now. And then any chance of somehow resurrecting the year goes downhill when you go out to LA and lose to a UCLA team that hadn't been able to run the ball against anybody and hadn't been able to stop. Well, I shouldn't say that. They actually were really good stopping the run, but they couldn't hold anybody in check through the air. It was one of the worst pass offenses in the conference.
Yeah.
And
that's a game, as you said in your preview.
Yeah, exactly. But the number of rushing yards, very unorthodox for this defense to allow. And then today, sort of routine, but like I said, at the same time, it just makes us reflect on what could have been. And I hate to do this and sound like a broken record every week, but that's kind of where we're at. Am I missing something along the line? I kind of gave everybody a summation of what the season has been in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the frustrating part is number one, what you're saying about the inconsistency. Number two, it's the pieces that they have, because they really do have some elite pieces. I mean, it has been as down as this season has been, and as upset as I am at the outcome. I really enjoy watching Drew Stevens kick the ball. He's a stud. Reese Dakin is a stud. He will be a stud in the future, but he's really good now. Caleb Johnson is having the best running back season that we've seen since at least Sean Green did 16 years ago, and maybe longer. You've got a Jay Higgins, who I'm a huge fan of. I absolutely love Jay. Whether or not he's the best linebacker Iowa's had in a while is certainly up for debate, more because Iowa's been fantastic at linebacker, not because he's not a generational player, because he is. Jamari Harris has been a stud. Ethan Hurkett's been really good. I mean, you look over the field, and across all 3 units, they have some really, really nice pieces. And it's just frustrating to see a season like Caleb Johnson's had go wasted. I think the other thing too is, the up and down variance of the team is catching us off guard a little bit, because I mean, honestly, I think if you look at a lot of programs in Iowa's tier, you probably see a lot more of this than what we're used to, right? You go to a middle of the pack, upper third SEC team, which is, Iowa's an upper third Big Ten team, but they're not a top 4 Big Ten team year in, year out. You go to any of the other Power 5 conferences and you look at those, 4th ranked teams in the conference, and you get this kind of variance. You get an 8-4 season where they have 3 or 4 games that, maybe they take it to a top 10 team or a top 20 team, and then they, lose a game against Kentucky or somebody they shouldn't lose. We're used to this team. Like last year, they showed up as the exact same team every single game. The offense was not good. They couldn't run the ball. The play calling was much the same week in, week out, but that defense was the same every single week of the season. I mean, the defense played basically 12 games of A- defense or better, right? Like, they did not have this kind of variance. And that, to me, I think is more of a testament to what that defense was than what this defense isn't, because I think that's something that a lot of programs are probably used to a lot more than we are. So I think that makes it a little bit more jarring, but certainly, it is just odd. I don't know when you remember a season being this roller coaster, up and down, topsy-turvy, but certainly,
2010, 16 would be the last examples, but I don't know that they were so erratic, bipolar, with what we've seen. More so just disappointing losses that, underplaying what you have talent-wise. And I think you can make that argument that this team is absolutely underperformed based on the talent.
Yeah.
But, I just, it's going to be hard to reconcile, I think, looking back. And, it's obviously the last couple of days have been interesting with some of the reports that have been flying, the rumors that have been soaring regarding Cade, regarding Jamari. Frankly, this is going to sound really harsh, Kyle, but I'm just going to say it because this is how I feel. I don't really care whether Cade's on the team right now. I don't care.
Me neither. Yeah.
I don't care. With all due respect, whether that report, there was any truth to that speculation. All right. And again, I don't know where it started. Don't care. But if there's any truth to the speculation that Cade, obviously he's not no reason to believe he is quote unquote quit the team. I don't know where that started, but any speculation he has no interest in playing week 12 or game 12, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't know what they gain from him. I know this is going to sound weird.
They don't gain anything from him playing.
And this is where I, as a try to be an objective analyst, so to speak, but ultimately I'm a fan at heart. This is where I differ from a lot of people, and I'm fine with admitting this. I tweeted out pre-game. I said, I do not want to see a heavy dose of the run game today, 200-some rushing yards from Caleb, and a 29-16 win. Now, I didn't say that exactly, but I knew that was going to happen. That's why I tweeted it out. I'm like, I know that's going to happen.
It's too predictable.
It's boring.
Yeah.
It's boring.
There's nothing more boring in college football than watching Iowa's offense up 2 scores.
And I'm going to get ripped for saying that because here's a post-game show where I should be celebrating a win. But Kyle, can we just admit the game we just watched was boring? It was boring.
It's as little interest as I've had in an Iowa game in a long time.
But it's not just because of the situation. It's because
it was not a good game to watch. It was not. And we can complain, by the way, about the Jazzy Peterson and all this stuff. I caught a little bit of the beginning of the show. I know you guys talked about it. Like, why would you put a good commentator crew on that? I mean, I know you're supposed to have all your crews be good, but like,
I didn't think the crew
I get it. Why would you put the best of the best on that game? It was a crap game. Maryland fans did not show up, and we were not surprised by that whatsoever. I know listening to your show on with Mark and the Maryland kid that came in, like they were ready for this. They knew this was going to happen, and maybe the football program deserves it at Maryland to a certain extent. I mean, I wouldn't say they deserve that little attendance, but they certainly have not lived up to their end of the bargain this year. But like, it was like, it's like, and I'm seeing in the chat here, Finn says, "Oh, it's BTN's 5th or 6th string crew." I mean, it was the 5th or 6th string game. It was like,
I don't think there's anybody on BTN that I have a problem with. Like, I know there were some mistakes made, but you ever listen to Gus Johnson? That guy gets everybody's names wrong. And he's doing the big noon kickoff for Fox. So, and I like
Gus. Best of the best. Yeah. I mean, I like Gus too. I like
Gus, but that's, so I don't know. I'm like, there's some people that's really going to resent that. And I know there's people that disagree with me because when I tweeted that out, there were a couple people that were like, just get the win. Doesn't matter what it looks like. And I'm like, well, I said to one guy, I'm like, good for you. And don't worry. Kirk agrees with you.
Yeah.
That's what he wants.
You and Kirk are on the same page. Kirk wants to he wants to chase the 205 wins. He wants to get to 9 wins this year so he can say, oh, we won 9 games last year. I don't know what you're going on about.
You're drawing the macro conclusions. I'm not even going to draw the macro conclusions about the 200 some wins. What I'm talking about is just how you get from point A to point B. And and that's what a lot of great coaches do, right? You've got to be able to look at each game at a time. And in general, it works, right? The problem is when you have a season like this where you lose 4 games. Like last year, they won how many games? Won 10 games with Deacon Hill. I know he wasn't the starter from week 1 to the bowl game, but he was the starter the majority of the season, and they won. And like you said, they were more consistent. They were
the same team week in, week out last year. They were the exact same team.
They weren't even good on the ground last year.
No, they weren't.
One, because the defense was that good. Special teams was that good. And so I guess that's my point. Like, we saw a lot of boring football last year, but it's different when you're still in the mix for something.
Yes.
And they've been in the mix every year until now. They've been in the mix until late November every year since 2018. I'm trying to think of the
Yeah,
last.
I was going to say 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22. They were all 23. They were all in the mix late.
They've been in the mix.
Even when they went 7-5, they were in the mix.
Correct, because the West was
most atrocious. Yeah,
and they lost
Which,
last
look,
week.
maybe. And by the way, looking back, that team should not have been in the mix for anything.
But it doesn't. Yeah, but it doesn't matter, right? Like you still.
But it does, yeah, it's still
certain people, including myself to some extent, captivated because even though it may be boring football, it's predictable football, it's ugly football, you're getting enough wins that way. I remember going up to Madison last year, the 15-6 win, and I remember saying to myself and verbalizing this during the game, this is exactly what Kirk wants. Control the field, win 15-6. That's exactly what they did.
By the way, though, that 15-6 game was way more exciting than this 29-13 game.
It was.
Right.
But part of why it was more exciting, Kyle, is because they were still in contention.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's just part of it. So I respect anybody who says get the win no matter what it looks like. But I think you as a fan also have every right to feel dissatisfied to some extent and feel let down even after a win because you're like, it's just not as entertaining as I have come to expect. And maybe that means you're spoiled. I don't know that that's what that means, especially if you're a paying fan. I don't think as long as you're keeping it above the belt, I don't think there's any reason why you can't sometimes complain about the product. Yeah. But you can get by with boring football if you're winning enough to be in contention for some form of a championship, whether it be a division title, a conference championship, or a playoff berth. Because they're not involved with those anymore, at least not right now in this season. I can totally relate to somebody who feels kind of checked out to some extent, but still has to watch because you're an avid Hawkeye fan. It doesn't make you any less of a fan. But anyways, that's my soapbox.
It is. Yeah, it is brutal. There's nothing worse than being boring and irrelevant, and that's what they are right now. I mean, the only thing I will say, even though they're not in contention for anything, if Wisconsin is to win today, next week will have my full attention, and I think you know why.
Sure. Yeah, I understand when wanting people to keep Nebraska out of a bowl. I understand that, and that will be a more. I mean, we don't even know who's going to play. Like, who is Stratton going to be the starter next week? Could it still be Cade? Is Marco going to be? I mean, how much does that thumb heal in another week? I thought it was wild to see him out there with
the warming up. Yeah,
can you imagine him?
Who tweeted out that said he was their backup? Marco Lainez Marco Lainez with a cast as their backup quarterback.
That's wild. But so Jackson Stratton's health is of prime importance. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse line. We have got Corey here. Corey, welcome.
And I'm a little, excuse me, under the weather, but excuse me. I'm going to continue with my Kirk Ferentz apologist.
I know you are. That's why I brought you in after my spiel, because I'm sure I'm sure your blood was boiling as I was talking. Wasn't it, Corey?
It was. My blood pressure's up.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to list off some pretty good programs that are below us in the Big Ten.
Here we go.
And you just soak in the names of these programs. Purdue, who was in the Big Ten championship a couple years ago. UCLA, yep. Michigan State, and Nebraska, that great blue blood program. USC, Michigan, Wisconsin, I won't mention Rutgers, Washington, and Minnesota and Illinois are all behind us and would all kill to be where we're at. And we're having an off season. And I think for us to show hate towards Kirk Ferentz is just really bratty and unappreciative.
Who's showing hate? Who's showing hate?
A lot of people online. Kirk has to go. Fire Kirk. Fire KF.
That
all
happens.
That crap.
Corey,
all that crap.
That's always out there, though, Corey.
Yeah. Well, it's gained momentum.
It's going to be out there more when you lose 4 games and you brought as much back as he did. That's going to be out there more, but that's always out there.
So we brought all of those defensive backs back that are freshmen and sophomores.
No, they brought back all their upperclassmen, but with the exception being Cooper DeJean, they brought back everybody else in the defensive backfield. Xavier Wampa, Quinn Schulte, Jamari Harris, Cohen and Tringer. They brought all those guys back.
Yeah, but we played a lot of freshmen, and there's your inconsistency, because now you've got a situation where it's matchups, and Iowa State could match up against our DBs better. Michigan State and their athletes, they broke our ankles with their athleticism based on matchups. And,
what about UCLA? Don't skip over UCLA. Explain that one.
They're athletes.
UCLA running game that is dead last in the conference and gashed Iowa for like 230 yards on the ground. You're going to attribute that to it.
That was their Super Bowl, because they wanted to say,
a lot of Super Bowls
they wanted to say, you guys think you're so great with your Caleb Johnson flex. We're going to show you guys.
That was the most inexcusable matchup performance I've ever seen from Iowa.
Okay, was that a short week when our O-line was worn down? Was that not a short week?
Sounds like a lot of excuses.
No, the O-line was not stopping the UCLA run either way.
I'm talking about our run game was stopped because UCLA was fresh off of a bye week.
I think that part is more excusable. I think it's the run game that I was upset with, because you could throw. You've got defensive linemen in the waiting in the ranks, so you can rotate those guys in and out.
Real quick, can I just say something real quick? Because how much did I get ripped for saying that Michigan State was crap? They have not won a game. They have not won a game since they beat Iowa, Corey. They have not won a game. They're 1 week away from going 5-7. They're crap. They're crap.
And they've been non-competitive most weeks too.
You go anywhere on any given week at a night game.
I know.
A night game, and you can lose.
Yes, I agree.
And we might see that with Penn State tonight. We might. It'll be a shocker, but it could happen.
Yeah. Let me take that back. Michigan State narrowly beat Purdue yesterday. So they had not won until last night, right?
Until they beat the worst team in the conference.
And they beat Purdue by 7, the same team that you were. So they're 5-6, I believe, in the conference now. They have to, and overall, they've got to beat Rutgers next week to be bowl eligible. And they may win that game, but they had not won a game since the Iowa game up until that win last night against Rutgers.
But the difference is a Kirk Ferentz coach team doesn't lose 4 in a row like Nebraska's Matt Rule coach team. So I think people need to appreciate Kirk Ferentz never strings losses together. He makes damn sure he fights back the next week. And that's what I like about Kirk Ferentz.
That's true.
And he gets no love for that.
I have heard Corey say many a time, one of Kirk's best traits is he rallies the troops.
I'm talking about the masses. I'm talking about the mass group of haters out there. And I think that if you look at it makes sense. Look at Vegas. What Vegas have us going this year? 7-5, right?
Vegas is low every year on Iowa's over.
Okay.
Though. They had us at 7. They had us at 7.5 wins last year.
I don't know what that proves, but you're right. Vegas was very close on that. You were right on that.
Yeah.
So do we create expectations because that's what we want? And it's not because we have the right to expect them, but it's more about we want that because we want more. And we've been in the Big Ten championship, but we want more. Well, it's okay to want, but these fan bases that are throwing temper tantrums and wanting Kirk Ferentz fired, you people need to check yourselves. It's like you have one of the best coaches in the Big Ten consistently. He takes 45 and 50th ranked recruiting classes and finishes 20 positions above his ranking on a consistent basis. Again, if you want to trash him because of his recruiting capabilities, then do it. Go find that coach that's going to bring in all these recruits. But be careful, because it might be like Florida State. You get all the recruits, but you lose all the games anyway. So it's, to me, I think we need to be thankful as well as, yeah, I wanted more this year. That's why I bought season tickets for the first time. Living 500 miles away, I didn't care. I was buying season tickets because I was going to be there to witness this great year. It didn't happen. But you know what? My butt will be in the seats in Kinnick next weekend, and I'll be 100% invested. And I will have great joy in watching my favorite football team in the entire world perform the best they can perform. And all the haters that want to fire Kirk Ferentz, just know that I love Kirk Ferentz 10 times more than you hate him. And I always will. Because Kirk Ferentz represents the state
let
of
him go,
Iowa.
Kyle. Let him keep going. Keep going.
Kirk,
Corey.
Well, okay, I have a question though, because I want this to actually be constructive. I don't want this to be a like, oh, this season's been a failure and I love Kirk Ferentz. Like, neither side of that I'm particularly interested in. What I am interested in though is, and Corey, you can chime in on this as well. The frustration for me is we had expectations that were set based on I went through the players earlier. Corey's talked about them at length. The great pieces that they had that they were bringing back that other people in the country were not bringing back. I mean, they brought back everybody except Cooper DeJean basically on defense that were main key contributors. They maybe lost one or two others, but
Noah Shannon got
Noah Shannon, sure. But I mean, they didn't have him last year. So, I mean, they brought back basically everybody that contributed last year on defense. They brought in a new offensive coordinator who retrospectively, Corey, we can agree on this. I think Tim Lester has been a huge success this year.
Absolutely, yeah. He's been very good.
I mean, they're ranked 15th in points per game. I don't know. They're 15th in rushing. Like
the offense has taken a big step forward.
An enormous leap.
Hold on. Let me qualify that.
Okay.
He brought a great ability to move the ball up and down the field. How many turnovers have we had that have cost us games this year? That how many games were lost in the turnover battle? So you can argue.
I don't know. You can't just say that without statistics to back up what you're saying. Are you claiming?
I'm going to look at it right now. I don't think they're very high in turnover differential.
Okay, my point is, just because you move the ball up and down the field and create a lot of yards doesn't mean it's a great offense. Look at Nebraska.
They've doubled their points per game output over the course of the last year. They've doubled their point per game output. I have a record in today. They scored 29. I think they were right around 30, and they finished last year 15.
They're 12th in the country in turnover
doubled their points per game output.
My point is though, my point is in key games, because we put the ball at risk a little bit more in this offense, and we don't play the Kirk Ferentz ball that everybody trashes. There's times when we're going to experience more turnovers. It's just going to happen because we put the ball into harm's way. And I'm not saying that it's not a better offense because it moves the ball and scores points, yes. But what I'm saying is there can be occasions where you're going to lose a game that you might not have lost last year where we played so close to the vest. There's going to be those one-offs. It's like a more robust offense with more capabilities is like a great three-point shooting team, or it's supposed to be one like Iowa that lost in basketball because they couldn't make any three-pointers or they turned the ball over a lot.
Real quick, can I just say that they're top 25 in the country right now in fewest turnovers lost.
Yeah, they're 12.
No, but in a couple of games, they lost all their turnovers.
Okay.
So I'm saying my point is,
I don't know what your point is, but
my point is that this offense can put the ball in harm's way more than in previous years.
I don't believe that.
We're throwing the ball into traffic
I watched
more.
Deacon Hill. I watched Deacon Hill cough up the ball on a nightly basis last
You
year.
want to know the turnover count this year and last year, Corey?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
They turned the ball over 22 times last year. They've turned it over 10 times this year.
It's not the same player. Deacon Hill was a turnover machine. Come on, let's be honest here.
What's that? I don't know what
he's in the Kirk Ferentz system though.
What are you? I don't understand what you're getting. Are you just trying to discredit Tim Lester because
no, I am not.
That they're better than they were last year with Brian? Is that what you're mad about?
What I'm saying is that a Tim Lester offense and a defense with playing freshmen in corner positions is bound to have one or two games that are off games because number one, it's a new offense. Number two, you have this offense has more moving parts than it had previous years. And for these players to pick it up in 1 year and a system to be implemented in 1 year, and we're going to win it all this year, I don't think so. I think we have to be grateful that we put in a system that's going to have a higher ceiling, but there's going to be growing pains with it. And because of Tim Lester's offense, it puts the ball into traffic points of it. You put the ball, you're passing it in traffic areas at times where if the timing isn't right, you're going to get a pick. You're going to throw a pick. It's just the way it is. And the same with
Corey, I got to move on to Tom. I got Tom Kakert waiting on hold.
Oh, okay.
Stay on the line though. We'll bring you back after. At least if Corey's going to leave, we'll bring you back because I want to.
Right, let's bring him. We're going to bring in Tom. Tom, I'm sorry, not to keep you waiting. Okay. I know you're busy, so thank you for being here. This is Tom Kakert, HawkeyeReport.com. Tom, fresh off time with Kirk Ferentz. You're out in College Park, Tom. Am I right?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
You were one of about 50? I'm just joking. First of all, I saw you tweet out about the crowd pregame. Obviously, this is a Maryland team that after today eliminated from bowl conversation. But were you surprised with the lack of support from Terps fans, or is that kind of par for the course based on your experiences out there?
Yeah, it's not a great crowd usually, and the students were out of town, so that's a problem. They started their Thanksgiving break, so they, back when I went to college 100 years ago, we would go to college Monday and Tuesday, and then be done on Wednesday probably and go home for Thanksgiving. Now they get the whole week off. Yeah, it's a nice life.
Well, I'm just glad that you were able to make it out there, Tom, and able to report back. So I'm sure Kirk was thrilled with the victory. Obviously, going out there with a fourth-string quarterback, a kid who's walking on, first career start on the road. I know it's maybe not the raucous environment that some road venues may throw at a young guy, but controlled the game on the ground, controlled field position through most. I know there were maybe a couple hiccups there in the second half from the defense, giving up some yardage, but in general, pretty picturesque Iowa performance, and obviously terrific on special teams, mostly coming from Drew Stevens. What were kind of some of Kirk's major takeaways?
Yeah, it went pretty much according to the plan that they had, which was kind of run the football and take some of the pressure off of Jackson Stratton in his first start, and they executed that to perfection, particularly in the first half. I thought the first half was just as good as Kirk Ferentz. If Kirk Ferentz could have drawn something up, it would have looked exactly like that, except for the turnover by Kamari Moulton, obviously. But everything else was just as scripted. They were running the ball. They were controlling the clock. They were taking pressure off Jackson. Also not having to work the defense very hard. And Jay Higgins, in particular, on him.
I think we got you back, Tom.
There we go. I lost you guys for a second. There we go. There we go. I don't know what happened. Everybody disappeared from it, including myself. I got worried.
The last thing you lost yourself. That's never good. The last thing I heard you say was
it was like Back to the Future when they started disappearing off the picture. I started
that's
going
right.
away. I was
Gotta
like, oh
figure
my
out how to
God.
get the pictures back. Anyways,
Yeah.
I heard you talking about Jay Higgins, but yeah, I mean
Yeah,
this game.
Jay appreciated only having her play like 15 plays or something in the first half because he was like, my hamstrings. It's pretty clear he's hurt but not injured, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, we got some pretty interesting comments from Kirk after the game too, just about maybe showing some a little bit more compassion towards Cade McNamara in particular, because of what he's dealing with his concussions, and talked about some concussion issues and the things that Cade has had to deal with the last couple of years, and just the health issues that he's had to, injuries and such that he's had to deal with. And he talked about a player, he didn't name who it was, but that got concussed. It was probably about 10 years ago or something, that got concussed and was out for a couple of games and then came back, and then basically just kind of got just dinged in the head just a little bit, and they were concussed again, but then they were back the next year and they never had any issues beyond that. So it's just how tricky a brain bruise, which is what a concussion is, can be. So he was, I think, maybe hoping that people would show a little more compassion towards him instead of some of the, I don't know, uncomfortable comments that they've made towards him, I
Vitriol.
guess.
Vitriol.
Vitriol, yeah, the anger. I've kind of been, it's been kind of strange to me how angry people have been at Cade, just because I don't think most Iowa fans wanted him to be the quarterback this week anyway. So why were you angry at him?
There's so much frustration over the way the season's gone. I'm sure people are just
Yeah.
looking to take it out on him.
Yeah. And he's
And
just,
by the way, if the rumors that were out there were true, I could understand why people would be angry. It was just they were, we had no evidence.
yeah, I'm at this point, I know Cade said in his statement, he hopes to be back Friday. I don't think there's any chance he's going to be back Friday. Just based on where he's at in his kind of recovery and what he shared. I think there's like zero chance that's, I won't say zero, but less than 5% chance that he's going to be under center. Just doesn't seem realistic. So
Do you think he'll play in a bowl game, Tom?
That's a good question. He may be able to, but I suspect that Brendan Sullivan's going to be the starter in the bowl game. That would be my guess. Kirk didn't rule out Brendan today in the post game, but it seems unrealistic is kind of the way he looked at it. So I think it will be Jackson Stratton leading the Hawks against the Huskers on Friday night at Kinnick Stadium.
What did Kirk have to say about the La Jolla native? Obviously, I thought Tim Lester called a really good game that fit the situation and fit personnel today and didn't put him in harm's way. And I thought Jackson managed things quite well for his first time under center officially.
Yeah, I thought he did a really nice job. It was 10 of 14, 76 yards, do no harm, no mistakes of note, manage the game. And that's kind of what you wanted, to avoid mistakes, manage the game, do what you need to do to get the team down the field. And, credit to like Nick DeYoung too, for stepping in with Dunk out. Dunk went down apparently on Tuesday. He was here. He looks okay. So I'm not sure, we didn't get any description on the nature of Dunker's injury, but he was moving around fine and seemed to be okay. We didn't get any more clarity on Jamari Harris because we had talked to Jamari on Tuesday, and he seemed fine. And if a guy is going to potentially miss the game, we generally don't see him on Tuesday. So something happened between Tuesday's press conference and Thursday when all this stuff sort of surfaced. And yeah, I just, I think he's dinged up. And I think he just felt it wasn't good for him to play. So that's the choice that athletes have to make.
Tom, I don't want to put you in a difficult position, but how do you reconcile some of the reports out there regarding Jamari reportedly opting out of the rest of the season, and then what Iowa commented last night regarding the injury situation? I mean, go ahead.
I do believe he's injured. I do believe he's probably going to have a minor surgical procedure, probably at some point. And he's probably dinged up. And so he's looking at his future and thinking, what do I have to do? My future is I've got to be healthy for these certain things coming up. And I might be cleared, but am I cleared and healthy? Right. I don't know there's a difference there. And, I hate to call it business decisions, but they're business decisions about his future. And he has to look out for that for himself. So I think that's kind of the nature of the decisions he makes. Now, people might term that differently. I always, there's the old thing, are you hurt or are you injured? And because I'll guarantee you, every guy in that roster, even the scout team guys, are hurt right now. But there are other guys, Sully, injured, can't play. Depends on how you do things. So, yeah, it's the complicated world that we live in college athletics today. It just is.
Tom, last thing for me, and then we'll let you get back to your duties, and then of course travels home back to Iowa City, Quad City safely. I'm assuming Kirk had some positive things to say about Drew Stevens, because obviously he was phenomenal today with everything. Yeah,
he was, and he made a tackle, and he was most proud of the tackle. By the way, I talked to Drew after the game. He was most proud of his tackle, and all the guys patting him on the back after he made that tackle. And he let it rip on that tackle too. He went after it. So good for Drew. I mean, and pair of 50-yard field goals, almost 3 50-yard field goals. I would hope.
All good by at least 8 to 10 yards too, by the way.
Oh, that 54-yarder, I tweeted out that it was 64 at least, maybe 70.
Easy.
I mean,
Easy.
He had the wind behind him. He did have a nice 20-mile-an-hour wind behind him, but he still banged those. I mean, those were halfway up the goalposts at 54 yards. I mean, that's 64, 70 yards, probably still making it pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Kakert, HawkeyeReport.com. People can follow him at Hawkeye Report on the good old X and follow he. And, of course, people haven't watched our women's basketball shows. Kyle Huseman, who also works for the Hawkeye Report team, part of our coverage this year.
Hopefully
Tom,
Kyle's doing good. Is Kyle doing a good job for you? I haven't been able to tune in.
We were both in Sioux Falls on Wednesday, so we were able to they had us sitting next to each other, so that was good to get to know Kyle a little bit better.
Awesome.
He's been doing a slam dunk job, so we appreciate both of you.
Stuff.
Yeah, Kyle's awesome. So glad you're having him on.
Well, Tom, travel back to the Quad City safely, and we'll talk to you after a Black Friday win.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. Good stuff. Appreciate the super chat here from DC Hawkeye. Thank you for this. I know I displayed it earlier, but do appreciate the compliment here. DC Hawkeye says, nice show, Corey. Thank you. And then Lemansky, availability is key for a defense. TJ Hall shows up to improve. So happy for the young man today. Good interception. I skipped over a couple of things when I was kind of reviewing my notes. The Kamari Moulton run was terrific. Great moment for a kid who fumbled earlier in the game. And I do think he's probably going to lead the charge in that backfield. Now, we don't know what's going to happen in the portal. We got a couple of young guys. Brevin Dahl traveled today. I didn't talk to Tom about that, but he was in uniform. Maybe he ends up being a guy who works his way into that defensive backfield next year. You got Xavier Williams out of Chicago. But, boy, it was good to see Kamari Moulton knock off the big run. And then TJ Hall, a guy who's had his ups and downs in his career. And hopefully next year, now with Jamari leaving, this will be a battle, assuming they all stick around, between John Nestor, TJ Hall, Deshaun Lee, and Jalen Watson for 2 spots. And maybe somebody else works into the mix. Maybe they grab somebody in the portal. That's always possible. But it was good to see TJ Hall show up. Now, he did commit the pass interference in the second half in the end zone, but 15-yard penalty in college. And I almost wonder if he felt he was getting beat there, never really turned around, kind of just latched on to, was it Pryor? What's the kid's name? Why do I keep forgetting his name? What's the receiver's name for Maryland that's so good?
The Blitnikoff semifinalist or whatever.
Yeah, why do I not know that? I'll pull that up here in a second. Anyways, I got the official box score here in front of me. I am thinking of let's see here. Ty Felton, who finished today with 6 catches on 6 targets, 57 yards, and a pair of touchdowns. And by the way, Maryland finished for the game with just 129 yards. This is a Maryland team that averaged over 300 passing yards per game. They finished with only 129 through the air. Now, part of that's because Billy Edwards was really dinged up, ended up leaving the game and not returning. Yeah. But Iowa held him in check when he was in there, 5 of 8 for 26 yards. And let's see, find his numbers on the ground. Where are his rushing numbers? Let's see here. Go back up. Why am I not seeing his? Here we go. Rushing yards. Billy Edwards finished with 28 yards on the ground. Morris, MJ, who came in for in relief duty, finished with 9 carries for 18 yards. Of course, sacks part of that as well. Lemansky, thank you for the super chat. We do appreciate it. John wants to know our take on Castro. I'll let you take this one, Kyle. He says, I think he's had a disappointing season, but I know he's a good player. I'm not any draft scout, NFL scout expert. This would be a better question for Coach, but your thoughts on Sebastian's performance this year?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's been bad. I mean, there have been a couple plays here or there where I think we've said, oh, that's not really Sebastian. But, I mean, for me, it's just and maybe it's biased towards the one Wisconsin game. I mean, he took over that Wisconsin game last year. He was a standout. I mean, he was player of the game in that game. And to me, it's not that I've seen a whole bunch of really, really bad play from him, because I don't think that's true. And I don't think anybody can say that. It's just, we're used to him, especially last year, being somebody that popped off your screen. I mean, there are certain players, whether it's athleticism, whether it's being in the right spot, like with Jack Campbell, he's always in the right spot all the time, right? Jack Campbell always had a nose for the ball. That popped off your screen. So it's not even necessarily athletic ability, but Castro was one of those players that popped off your screen as being always in the right place at the right time, and then also the reputation for being an incredible tackler. I mean, I think that was another thing too. And this entire team has not done that very well. So I wouldn't say he's been, I mean, he would probably tell you he's had a not great season, but I wouldn't say he's washed up. I've seen some people say Castro's washed up. I wouldn't say that. But probably not the season he was hoping for.
And then let's see here, a couple more things. Andrew brings up Moulton. Yeah, I think he's probably the lead back next year, but Jazz has had good moments as well. It should be healthy competition there. And, of course, Leishon, last I saw, he was visiting a Big 12 school this weekend. I think that was the tweet.
Where was he today? I saw his Instagram story. He was down south somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere in the Big 12. Probably down in Texas somewhere. So,
yeah.
And then Andrew, let's see here. He says, is it that Iowa can't recruit good quarterbacks so they can't develop a good QB or both? Well, first of all, Tim Lester just got here. And, hey, he's only brought in 2 guys, and both of them just got to school here a few months ago. Brendan Sullivan being one who was, part of his development was at Northwestern. And, hey, Cade, most of his career he spent at Michigan. So, I mean, when he got brought in, I kind of made the statement that, hey, they're bringing in a guy who's already been developed by a head coach who's a former quarterback in Jim Harbaugh. I really don't think Cade has been as bad as some people make him out to be. Part of the problem has been he's been so plagued by injuries, and then when he has been available, he has not played up to par. But I don't think he's been as bad as the previous 2 starters. And I'm talking about the starter of most of last year and the starter of 3 years for the 3 years prior. I'll debate somebody on that. We can pull up numbers. I'm guessing you're doing that.
I was going to do that. Actually, regardless of you saying that, just give me a second to
Sam, thank you for reminding everybody. Hit that like button, folks. If you're here, we got about 200 people here on the broadcast, be sure to hit the like button. It's free. It's a way you can support the show. And of course, telling your friends is another way. Word of mouth is very powerful, but hitting the like button helps us in the YouTube algorithm. And while Kyle's pulling that up, I want to take a moment to thank our good sponsors, one being Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm. Give him a call if you have not already done so to get an idea of what he can do for you as it relates to insurance policies, whether it be life, auto, renters, etc. Give Brad a call at 515-256-6480. 515-256-6480. And Brad and his whole team, they're big Hawkeye fans down on Fluor Drive in Des Moines. And also want to thank Iowa Smokehouse. Tasting is believing with their jerky, their meat sticks, their steak bites, their salsas, their barbecue sauces. It's all delicious and great for a game day get-together or just for yourself on game day or, frankly, any evening. Use the code Hawkeyes. That's the code Hawkeyes at iowasmokehouse.com for 15% off your total order. Again, that's the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order, a limited time offer via this show and iowasmokehouse.com.
Okay. You wanna I'm gonna send you something on Twitter if you want to put it on the screen for the just for the fun of it. I'm not necessarily arguing with you that he's been worse than the two previous, but I just want you to pull that up and tell me what you think.
All right. So you're gonna let's just why don't we just save this? I'm gonna try to do this the old fashioned way. I'm saying old fashioned as I work in a StreamYard studio. Anyways, let's see if we can pull this up on the screen. Oh, this dumb thing. Okay, give me a second here, Kyle.
You're good. I wasn't sure the best way to present it.
Yeah, no, you're good. These are always hard to do on the fly. We'll try
hit the like button while you're here. Smash the like button. We need some more viewers here.
Here's the number. We'll put them right across our faces. How about that? Can I scooch down? All right. I'll scooch down and look at. All right. So here are the numbers, folks. I'm assuming. See, there's a reason why you didn't label the names on here, right?
Correct. I know who's who. I want to see if you know who's who.
Well, can I just say this? Part of the difference is Spencer, and I know I'm sounding like I'm making excuses now for Cade, but part of the difference was these numbers are basically identical. But part of the problem is you have Cade's numbers that were, I think, very significantly affected by being plagued by injuries. Spencer Petras, in large part, was not plagued by injuries. And, Spencer also had a really good run game in 2020. So, Cade had that luxury this year as well when he was healthy. Mm-hmm. So maybe I'm a little more forgiving for Cade. And this is, I'm assuming what are these numbers representing? I'm assuming these are representing Spencer's last year versus Cade this year.
Yeah, I think it was Spencer's last 12 starts against Cade's first 12 as a Hawkeye. Okay. I believe. I could be wrong, but it was a 12-game stretch of Spencer Petras versus Cade's first 12 starts. And
I guess we could do this. How about that? Doesn't that work a little better?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I get it. The stats wise, they maybe look very similar, but do
you know who's is who? I guess they're identical. So
I think the top one is probably Cade.
Top one is Spencer.
Okay.
So slightly higher QBR, slightly less turnovers, slightly more yards. I mean, it's all marginal. It's all
basically the same, identical. I think the other thing with Spencer, for me, with all due respect, it's just like with Spencer. I wish Cade nothing but the best. When I said earlier, I don't care if he comes back. I don't care if he plays another down at Iowa. I want him to have success in life. It's nothing. People always draw these personal generalizations. I want him to, certainly that health is priority, right?
Yeah.
But as it relates to him as a football, I don't care if he plays another down at Iowa. I just don't. Same with Petras. I hope Spencer has a great career beyond football. Sounds like he's having some success on an individual level at Utah State this year. That's phenomenal. I think my struggle with the Spencer Petras career was the fact that it lasted so long.
Yes.
this Cade thing.
But again, whose fault was that? I
agree. I agree with you.
Spencer's fault. Yeah.
I agree with you. But like this Cade thing this year had to end this year, and we were calling for that to end 3 straight years with Spencer Petras.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll say. I mean, there's without no question about it, Iowa has an issue at quarterback, and they've got to get that issue resolved. And I think Tim Lester is the guy to do that. I think he's already begun by getting guys. Well, I'm not going to mix Jackson Stratton into the mix because to me, we haven't seen anything that's indicative of, oh, he's the guy of the future. But Brendan Sullivan is a piece you can build around in 2025. And we'll see what he does beyond that. Can he retain Marco? Will he want to retain Marco? That's the other part of this. If he doesn't think Marco lines up with what he's got in place in his system, then he may say to Marco, you're not going to play. And then Marco goes and finds another home. I hope that didn't happen. Yeah. But is it possible that it happens? Hey, James Reesar already shifted over to a different position on the football field. Obviously, Tim didn't see him as a quarterback. Not as a quarterback at this level. You have Jimmy Sullivan coming in next year. I'm assuming Tim is going to work with him. He's a good prospect. It's not like Iowa was the only – I don't know he had a ton of other Power 5 offers, but hopefully this is a job that Tim can run with. And, I don't know what types of schools are going to be after Tim Lester in the offseason. I'm sure there's some schools that love to hire Tim Lester right now. But can they be as lucrative as Iowa? We'll see. We don't know. We also don't know.
I can't imagine there's too many more programs that are more lucrative than Iowa that would want him over their offensive coordinator. I mean, a lot of those schools have really great offense. I'm not saying Tim Lester's not good, by the way. I'm saying there's a lot of those schools have great offensive coordinators already.
Yeah. Okay, folks, we're recapping Iowa's 29-13 victory over the Maryland Terrapins, and our RTI Threads player of the game today, Drew Stevens, 5 of 5 field goals, 26, 27, 49, 50, and 54, a pair of extra points, and a tackle on a kick return. Speaking of RTI Threads, be sure to check out their lineup over at rtithreads.com/NIL and shop their website. Aaron Graves Apparel, Jacob Gill Apparel, Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer, Owen Freeman, Josh Dix, go down the line. They got lots of deals, lots of partnerships, all supporting Hawkeye Athletics and Hawkeye athletes in this show from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Visit it at rtithreads.com and shop the NIL division.
I have a question for you, Corey, now that we've had Tom on.
Okay.
This is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today with the optics of the whole Cade thing, right? Because obviously we know press conference earlier this week. Number one, Cade was quarterback 1 on the depth chart, right? And Kirk made it seem like there was a possibility he would play. And then there was no possibility that he would play. And then he quit the team. And again, it's a separate issue. But what do you make of now? I mean, now we're hearing from Tom, he's probably not going to play against Nebraska. And they're talking about a setback. I don't know that a setback justifies pushing him back 2 weeks. Surely if he's not going to play against Nebraska, it was a horrible concussion from the beginning. I mean, I don't know. That part confuses me because it was when did he have the concussion? It was against Northwestern. So it was October 26th. That was almost a month ago, and now we're talking he's not going to play next week too. I mean, we're going to be 5 weeks from the concussion at that point. I mean, if it was that bad from the start, why list him at quarterback 1? Well, I don't know. The optics of that confuse me.
Yeah, the only thing I can say is the explanation that was given from Iowa last night was that Cade McNamara there was basically a verbalization. Kirk misspoke. That's basically how Iowa explained it, that Cade was cleared to practice over the weekend. He was not cleared to play, and there are hurdles, and I'm no expert on concussion protocol at this level, but I'd be curious. Again, that's a good question for Coach Patterson based on his experience with maybe just with players in general, but quarterbacks. He coached quarterbacks toward the tail end of his career, was exclusively. So I'd like to ask him on that, but that's the only explanation I can have is that maybe the gap, at least. When Tom's just kind of speculating too, I think to some extent about whether he'd be available against Nebraska, but especially if he was not even cleared to play now, like if he wasn't cleared to play Tuesday when Kirk spoke to the media, but then he went through the entire week and he's still not cleared to play. That may be where the doubt comes in. I don't want to speak for Tom, but he was cleared to practice. He was never cleared to play. And maybe the Kirk depth chart was just optimistic thinking. And Kirk has been
Yeah,
known
that's the part that confuses me the most. The misspeaking, I can understand that, being cleared to practice versus cleared to play. I just don't know why, if he's not cleared to play, why we're putting him at quarterback 1 on the depth chart. That's the only question.
The hope, I think Kirk probably thought, well, he's back at practice. He'll be good to go by the time Saturday hits, but we're not sure. I don't know that Kirk really takes much of any interest in depth chart accuracy. I think we know he really doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
And I think, I don't know exactly, and ask Tom, and I did speak to a couple people last night down in Kansas City just about this topic, and I do wonder how Iowa received Cade's statement, because obviously then they had to come out with a statement explaining what happened on Kirk's end on Tuesday and then Wednesday night with the Gary Dolphin show. But based on what I heard, I don't know that Iowa knew about Cade's statement when he put it out. So,
and that's interesting too, because that stuff is normally coordinated, right? I mean,
well, one would think that a statement, a post like that would be, right?
Yeah.
So those are all good questions. I don't have the answer for. I just, without any disrespect to Cade and what he's done here and his contributions or lack thereof, if you feel strongly about it, I just don't have any interest in seeing him playing for Iowa. I'm fine with him being kind of like what Spencer Petras was his final year here, kind of a player coach through the remainder of his Iowa career. I'd be fine with Cade doing that. It sounds like a lot of his teammates respect him as a leader, and that's phenomenal. But I would like to be able to see not just what Jackson Stratton can bring. I'd like to continue to see more of Brennan Sullivan if he's back for the bowl game. And if Marco Lainez is any healthier this next week against Nebraska, I mean, I don't know how you possibly play him with a cast on one of those arms. That just seems bizarre to me.
That seems ridiculous.
I can't believe that. How do you snap the ball?
I've seen that on defense, but no way at quarterback. No way. That seems hard to fathom.
It's his offhand, right? But how do you?
He's going to hold the ball, and his guide hand is going to be in a ball, basically, like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
I
you know what? I wouldn't mind seeing it just for the laughs. If it's a blowout at the end of the game, I'd love to see it. The only other comment I'll make on Cade, and then we can move on. Yeah. I do think, and you probably will, we could probably talk to insiders of other teams, and they would probably say this is the case. When you have a player that is a very public transfer, like Cade McNamara was, like, it's not like, I'm sneaking into the portal and I'm going to, make my decision and then I'm going to Iowa. It was like, it was a national headline when he did it. When that happens, and then, people threw the number around on Twitter, $600,000. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if you know that either, but, to me, this is also going to be something to watch with the transfers, because you've got people like Caden Proctor, whether or not he got money from Iowa, he left very quickly. That's a reason to give players vitriol, or reason that players will receive vitriol. But also, if you're coming in and you're taking a large sum of money, I mean, people say it in the NBA all the time, you got paid and now you checked out. I'm curious to see how that plays out over the next several years, because if you have players that, and I'm not accusing Cade of that because he was hurt, but some of the increase in the anger could also be people contribute money to the Swarm, and then they see it goes to Cade McNamara, and then they get nothing for it, and he gets injured, and then he plays like crap, and then they hear this rumor that he's left the team, and all of a sudden they're up in arms. I think that contributes to it a little bit as well.
I think the bigger concern that fans and the program need to have, maybe, in my opinion, are less to do with how players are treated on social media, which I'm not excusing, the vitriol or hatred or whatever you want to call it. But I think the bigger concern is the Swarm losing supporters because of that kind of thing. That's the long-term implication.
Yeah, that could be the big fallout from it.
Is if the big name deals, you talked about Cade and Caden, and regardless of the ins and outs of those things.
And also setting aside the fact that they have had Lucy Olson, who's been a great success so far, and I think will continue to be, and Nick Jackson and several others that have been key contributors. It's unfortunate that those people get left aside, because I've loved having Nick Jackson on Iowa. I've enjoyed watching Lucy Olson so far.
That's where the program and the collective together really are going to have to self-promote
Yes.
its own successes, right?
Yes.
Because
Right.
it'd be easy. It's easy to focus in on the failures, and those sometimes are, they always say bad news sells. In that case, I think there's some truth to that, especially with social media and with fan bases like the Iowa fan base. Fans are going to lock onto those big name deals, but I'm not going to. I've been told numbers on the Cade thing, but I'll just tell you, he got a lot of money to come here.
Yeah. Regardless, it was
we know
well
that.
into six figures.
We don't need to go into. He got a lot of money to come here, and so fans have a right to be frustrated. Now, does it mean it's okay to go on social media and throw hate at a kid? No, but I just think there needs to be balance with how we approach the situation. And again, I have no problem with someone making that statement that they hope they never see Cade in an Iowa uniform playing again. That's not a personal attack. That's just an opinion. So,
yeah.
Anyways, anything else, Kyle, from you? I don't really know where else to go with that other than I'll be anxious to get Don's opinion tomorrow on this whole Jamari thing and the Cade thing and whatnot. And it's always nice to get Coach Patterson a day after because he's able to go back and kind of review the tape. I'll try to do the same. And this will be right after our women's basketball postgame show because Iowa plays Wazoo on the hardwood back in Carver tomorrow. Of course, the women undefeated. So we'll have a triple dose of postgame this weekend, not counting last night.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I always enjoy hearing Don the day after. I think it'll be, I mean, I think I know what we're going to get from him because he always is the voice of reason around here. And you are too, to an extent. I can be the drama queen on this stuff, but mostly because I enjoy it. By the way, but no, it'll be good to hear what he says, and I'm curious to see what he thinks about this Nebraska game and with Jackson potentially playing. Previewing that a little bit. The only thing I'll add, we just lost our other Corey at the bottom there. I'm sure you're sad we didn't get to add him back in again, but
with all due respect, he could go on for a while. So
he could. I just want to point out, and I know it's unfair because I don't have him now to rebut this, but they've got 10 turnovers this year, 3 fumbles, 7 picks. I went back and looked sort of during the call with Tom and as you're talking there through the ads. This is the lowest number of turnovers that the offense has had per game since I could find records in 2016. So they're turning the ball over less per game this year, and that includes 2020 when they were pretty low. They were down at just over 1 turnover a game. This year they're just under 1 turnover a game. I mean, they had 22 turnovers in 2023, 17 in 22, 19 in 21. They had 9 in 2020, but that was a 8-game season with COVID. 12 in 2019, 19 in 2018, 19 in 2017, and 13 in 2016. So they're at 10 turnovers. They're not turning the ball over at a high clip. This is a team that is moving the ball more and taking better care of the football as well. And by the way, those 10 turnovers are in an offense that is running significantly more plays this year than they did in years past because they couldn't stay on the field in years past. So like the 2023, 22 turnovers, how many drives did they have where they were on the field 4 plays or 3 plays, I guess, 3 and out, or 6 plays or 9 plays or whatever. And they're still turning the ball over 22 times and 17 times and 19 times. So I like what I see from a numbers perspective, and my eyes reflect that when I watch the game.
Folks, we have post-game coverage continuing tomorrow night, myself and Coach Don Patterson. And before we head off the airwaves today, right now, we do want to make sure everybody's aware of what the website looks like over at Ascent Nutrition. Here's what it looks like. If you're new to the platform, here's one of our loyal sponsors, Lance Shuttler and his great team down at Ascent Nutrition. This is a proud company with Iowa roots. And as I've gotten to know Lance over the course of several years, continually impressed with what this great company and what Lance is doing just on a day-to-day basis to help people in the health industry. And of course, their detox bundle is something we're featuring here. Their pine needle extract, their humic and fulvic acid. These products go through rigorous third-party testing to make sure that what you're getting is pure. It's clean. It's the best in the market. And they've even got a 90-day money-back guarantee. These are organic and wild harvested products. And you can get this bundle right now for 15% off. And you can shop the rest of their great products here down at the bottom as well. But again, this is the Ascent Nutrition Detox Bundle. And you can get 15% off by using the code Hawkeyes15. Again, that's Ascent Nutrition. And the website, folks, is goascentnutrition.com. Again, that's goascentnutrition.com. Lance Shuttler and Ascent Nutrition helping people to live healthier and better lives. He's a former graduate of the University of Iowa and a big Hawkeye fan. And of course, in addition to Ascent Nutrition, be sure you go over to RTI Threads and check out their website. Here is their NIL division. And as you can see here, Cooper DeJean, one of their prime features. And also guys like Josh Dix, Owen Freeman, Jacob Gill, Carson Shire, the entire Swarm baseball community, a big part of what RTI Threads has done. Here is their website. And then when you visit rtithreads.com, just click on the NIL Athletes tab. This will take you to the NIL division. Again, that's rtithreads.com. Visit rtithreads.com/NIL.
We got one last note here before we go, Corey. I don't know if you're following the games of the day here. Penn State just looked like they were about to tie the game with Minnesota 17-all, and Minnesota has blocked the extra point and returned it for 2 to go up 19-16 at halftime. So an interesting start to that one. And Wisconsin, Nebraska at halftime, 24-10 Huskers. So we're going to need a big comeback from Wisconsin in the second half. Otherwise, that game next week loses just a little bit of luster.
Now, what's Wisconsin's record? They won 7
games.
They're
5-5 as well. So they're fighting for bowl eligibility. If they lose this week, then they will be. Let's see who they play next week. Oh, they play Minnesota for bowl eligibility next week.
Yeah, and that's a Minnesota team. Where are they at for bowl? They're
good. They're 6-4. They're
6-4. Wow, yeah. A lot of very even records with a lot of those West teams, right? That competed for the top of their division. That's so
really, really the only one that's I would say positively surprised us has been Illinois. Illinois at 8-3, 5-3 in conference play. What are they doing today? They snuck out of Rutgers with a 38-31 victory. Wow, they were down. What 17-9 at halftime in that game.
Good on Brett. They
were down 31-30 with a minute left. So
let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. We've got a late ad here. Kyle, the other Kyle, was with us. Kyle, welcome back.
Hey guys, slow night.
Yeah. I said to the other Kyle here before we hopped on there, I'm like, man, this is gonna be a slow night. Boring game. Game means nothing on the large scale of season goals. People aren't gonna get this is hot. This is social activity. So what's the word I'm looking for? Social behavior. This is how people react to these types of circumstances. I get it.
That makes sense. Hey, so I have a different question. In light of, whatever, we don't really know what the exact report is regarding Cade and, oh my gosh, the cornerback. Why am I forgetting his name?
Jamari.
Yeah.
Jamari. Thank you. One of the things I thought of is a lot of people, and I have no idea where I've heard this. So maybe some of you guys have talked about it, just how the 12-team playoff kind of added value to the players and the seasons, and there's more to play for, etc. And I couldn't help but I have no good thoughts and just wanted your thoughts. I couldn't help but wonder, this is kind of the inevitable outpouring of how this works. You lose that third game and your season, it's legitimately over in any meaningful way. And now there is, I guess when the news came out about those two, let's even say it's 100% wrong. It was believable because of the lack of success this year. And I just kind of wanted your thoughts on that, because I think a lot of people like the playoff, but it made me pause for 2 seconds and go, maybe this is an unintended consequence.
You mean the playoff as a whole, not just the 12-team playoff?
I mean that once you're not in, there really is nothing to play for. Even with the 4-team playoff, the season wasn't necessarily over for everyone. Obviously, with the BCS, there was so much to play for, regardless of if you were in the top two. And it does seem like a little bit more, and who knows how far they'll expand this, but just maybe an unintended consequence is now you're going to see kids pull out, 2-3 games left in the regular season. So again, whether or not it was true, it was believable because it's like, oh, it makes sense. They're not really playing for anything. Why would they play? And
that happened with the 14 playoff, and I totally agree with you. That's one of the things I've talked with our good friend Mark Rogers on Tuesdays. I think we talked about it maybe this past week. I love bowl games. I've always loved watching, and I still love watching the bowl games. But when you watch these bowl games and there's, the stadiums are literally like 5% full, and half of the starters aren't playing for half of them are in the portal, half of them have declared for the draft or whatever, and then you got guys who are just injured because it's the end of the year. Yeah, I mean, it takes away from the product 100%. And Iowa fans, here's what you're experiencing, Kyle. You're experiencing what every other fan base has experienced since the 14 playoff formed. We've never experienced that really because of what we said earlier, because of how the Big Ten was set up with divisions. Iowa was one of those weird places where even if you lost like 2 years ago, they had 4 losses heading into the final game of the year. They're 7-4, but they were still technically speaking, whether you want to discount it or not, they were still in contention for a Big Ten title because they were one win away from the championship game. So I think we're just experiencing that now. Now, there have been guys who have opted out of bowl games, but we've never, and I don't know how vast is the whole guys are opting out of the regular tail end of the regular season. We haven't seen that as much, although we did see a couple of guys this year midway through the season
say I'm not getting paid and leave.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know about who specifically you're talking about, Kyle, but
the UNLV quarterback and there were 2 or 3.
And I was I'm more so talking about Iowa with Caleb Brown, LeSean.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Those guys leaving it was a little bit unorthodox. I don't want to say unprecedented, but to some extent. So I do think I'll continue to double down on that stance, Kyle Dupik here we're talking to. I do believe that Iowa fans have just been in almost like a bit of a third or fourth dimension to some extent, because this has been happening a lot of different places and we're just now experiencing it for the first time, but we better get used to it because there are going to be a lot of Novembers that if the 12-team playoff is all that matters, there are going to be a lot of Novembers that aren't very fun.
Yeah. And this is a question I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, Corey. What Kyle's getting at here is, to me, more a denigration of the value of bowl games, because like with the 14 playoff and the BCS, like to me, the nice part about the playoff, right, is a team like a Boise State who's 12th in the country that would have no shot of making a top 4 playoff normally. Their fan base is probably very energized right now. Like a BYU, 14th in the country, they have 1 loss. They're energized right now because they think they could go play for a national championship in the playoff. Iowa State's a great example. When did they ever sniff a 14 playoff? I mean, one time in a wacky COVID year, and we've kind of hashed out how credible or not credible that season was. South Carolina's 18th right now. Some of those teams that are like in that 20th to 10th range that still have a lot of big games to play, like those teams are energized because of the playoff right now. Whereas if we're in BCS era, their national championship hopes are gone, right? And they're still playing for their conference, right? But to me, it's a combination of, number one, the conference mergers, because the conference mergers have made it so much harder for a lot of teams to make their conference championship game. Not saying that's a bad thing. Like Texas and Oklahoma will probably be great additions to the SEC over time, and they are. I mean, Texas already is. Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA probably will make great contributions to the Big Ten, but it makes it harder for those middle-of-the-pack teams to play for a conference championship. And then you have these bowl games, probably because of the money that's in the NFL now and maybe the money that's in college, where you've got so many of them opting out of the bowl game. So you've got the end of your conference season is now not relevant because you've got, what does the Big Ten have? Four teams that are 1 loss or 0 loss, I guess, with Indiana taking their first loss today. Ohio State stays a 1-loss team. You've got 4 teams that are clearly ahead of everybody else. So the other 14 teams in the Big Ten are not competing for a conference championship. Obviously, they're not competing for a playoff spot, and their bowl game's meaningless because of players that are worried about their NFL paychecks. So,
and by the way, Kyle D, our good friend Corey in the chat is, I think he's aiming this at you. He says, if you're not maybe he's aiming it at me. He says, if you're not top 12, you're not relevant, ? Well, we don't make the rules, do we?
Well, if the bowl games, if the bowl games were still, like, if players were still playing in the bowl games and there were still, like, we used to get,
we're not making that standard. The fans and the players are
the
making
engagement is what's making the standard. Yeah, people are not engaging with these bowl games. People are not buying tickets to the bowl games. They're not watching the bowl games because the players are not playing in the bowl games. The good players, the players that people are clicking in or turning their TV on to see, are not playing.
Yeah, I think that I don't know, why does it always have to be, whatever Corey's comment is towards. We're just talking about maybe an unintended consequence of the playoff expanding, right? Like,
my question though, Kyle, and I want to get both of your thoughts on this, is why would the playoff have anything to do with the bowl games becoming less meaningful versus the BCS? What about that setup?
Well, I think if you think about it from like maybe this will connect, maybe it won't exactly connect. I'm a huge baseball guy, right? I'm a baseball coach. I'm a huge Atlanta Braves fan. And the Atlanta Braves have been one of the best teams the last few years. This year, they had a bunch of injuries, but they actually won the World Series when they were like the worst team. In fact, the last few years since the expanded playoffs, this year was the first year that they didn't have like a 6 seed in the World Series. And football's a little bit different. And so I guess that's what I'm struggling with, is just trying to figure out, like, the NCAA tournament's kind of cool because there's still a way you can play yourself in theoretically, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also the demands of football make it such that you can't have a play-in, And so I think that's what kind of stinks, is that it will make the season feel less important when you're not playing for. And I think all the things you're throwing in, the expanded playoffs, the NIL stuff, like there's a lot here. We're not just talking about the portal. We're not just talking about the playoff, but I don't know, maybe if they expand the playoffs more, they'll have better ways to play in. And I don't know that I'm excited about that. I guess I just feel down because I remember being a fan of the Hawkeyes when we were fighting for 6 to 8 win seasons. And I remember there still being energy, and there's not energy. And of course,
we had fun at the Outback Bowl. Like
we did,
and
like let's acknowledge that there's a lot going on contextually that's different. The injuries, of course, the news this week that is right or wrong. The last few years pour into this. Like, of course, we're not saying each year is its own thing and isn't affected by the years before that, but there's a tangible difference in energy, and that stinks for me as a Hawkeye fan to not get to feel that. I'm going to go to the Nebraska game next week, and it'll be interesting who's there. I don't know. I don't know how
it's not going to be very good weather, I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's going to be cold. Like and does the rivalry matter enough to fill that place up and to give it energy? I think that there's a lot of great Hawkeye fans, but I also think that we have to acknowledge that the people who, one of the things Corey said that I actually don't agree with is like, well, all these fans are saying that we should fire Kirk. No, we're not, Corey. Like, the people that are saying that are the people that log into shows like this and like are really passionate. They're the people. Like, to judge something based on what you see in this YouTube's chat or on Twitter is like, everybody knows that that's silly. The people who say that stuff they're the loudest 1%. They don't speak for most people. And so I know that the Hawk base is great, but there's a lot of people who are going to check out now who aren't diehard Hawk fans that help fill up stadiums, that help make shows like this go more and more. And I guess my point is, it kind of stinks because I think the 12-team playoff takes away a little bit once you're not into that run. It just, the season doesn't seem to matter as much, and that stinks for us as diehard fans who really want those fans who are maybe only there when there's something to play for, and that stinks. There are fans that exist like that, and part of being even pros wise is running a franchise is getting those fans who aren't normally going to be there, Yeah.
Yep. And so here's my other question then. If it's not the current setup, what would you what needs to be changed for there to be more engagement? Because like to me right now, I understand from a selfish perspective, right? Iowa's not engaged because we're not relevant, right? The season's been a failure. We're not in contention for the playoff. But I could make a good argument that there are probably 20 teams that are still alive right now. And all 20 of those fan bases are still locked in, right? Like they're still excited. So it's like, to me, it's like, okay, yes, my fan base is not locked in. I'm not locked in because we're out of it. Now, part of that is if there was a 4-team or a BCS, like this team to me has been such a disappointment. And I know some people have said that's unfair of us to say that, but to me, it's been a huge disappointment. And I would be dejected based on the expectations for the season if they were 6-4, regardless of what they were playing for, whether it was a 12-team, a 4-team, or a BCS, right? Like to me, they're going to be 2 or 3 wins lower than they should have been, regardless of the postseason format. So we're not engaged. There's a whole bunch of fan bases that are, but there are a bunch that aren't. My question is, I don't know what to change in the format to make it so that the bowl, to me, it's a bowl game issue more so than a playoff issue, I guess. And I don't know how to address that because you've got, like Cooper DeJean was looking down the line last year at, I might be a first-round pick. I might walk into $3-4 million a year. Like that to me, and that's not going to change, right? So that is the tough part where those people are looking at the bowl games where they're not playing for a national championship and they're going, I don't want to risk $3, $4, $5 million. And in Cooper DeJean's case, I don't blame him for that because he deserved to get that payday, right? He was an incredible college football player. He looks like he's having a pretty solid season with Philadelphia. That is the tough part to me because like 15 years ago in the time frame that we're talking about, that type of money, I mean, there was money to go to the NFL, no doubt, but the like $4 or $5 million instant payday wasn't there the way it is now. So that's the tough part.
Part of the problem. Here's a part of the problem. I think part of the way you fix this is by somehow figuring out a way to create structure to a structure that's basically crumbled at the base, right? When this, I think it goes back to when NIL and the portal kind of almost simultaneously took off, and there's no salary cap for players. There's no rules on like, hey, a guy, if you're going to come here and do this, like you have to play this many games. I mean, they have that in the NFL and in major league sports, right? I don't know about baseball, Kyle, but a guy, there's contract stipulations that basically say that, you play this amount of this percentage of the season, And so I don't know exactly how that takes place. Does it, we go back to our conversation about a college football czar, so to speak, or I don't know. And a lot of this, unfortunately, we go back to the legal side of things because the Supreme Court is the one that ultimately said to the NCAA, hey, try to quit being what you've been for years, making, not allowing these kids to make money off their, and basically NCAA say, okay, we don't want more litigation.
Yeah. Well, and that was their problem, by the way, because they could have solved the issue before that. And then they took it to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court whooped them and now they can't do anything. So,
so I think if you could somehow enforce or at least incentivize student athletes to finish their year with their team, to stay with their team as opposed to enter the portal, get those transfer portal numbers down instead of going up like this. And we have 1,200 plus student athletes entering the portal every off season.
Yeah, they gotta.
But I think that's where it starts. If you don't want bowl games to remain irrelevant, because whether people, like Corey in the chat says, how can you say 12, the being outside the top 12 makes you irrelevant? Like I say, I'm not really making the rules. I'm kind of just basing it off of, I think we can all agree that there's little to no excitement about.
It's a simple matter of incentives. It's a simple matter of incentives.
Yes. Can we not acknowledge that, like, Corey, you do such a good job with your show on this all the time. Can we not acknowledge that there's goods on both sides? Like, It kind of stinks. Like, there were times when the BCS system failed us, like when Auburn was undefeated and doesn't get to play for a national title. Like, we can acknowledge that. So the expanded playoff is good. And other Corey, you're saying Kyle, you're saying that there's 20 teams who are in the running. That's super exciting. And so I think that we can acknowledge that on one hand, there are more teams who are in run for the national title than there's ever been, and that's exciting. And yet, at the
Absolutely.
same hand, we can say if you're not in that group, your season outside of us diehards doesn't mean much of anything anymore because of the other pieces. And I think that that's the part that kind of stinks as a college football fan if you're not in that 20 or so, like you said, Kyle.
Yeah,
Both can
and
be true.
it's tough as well because like I know personally, like if I take Iowa out of this, right? Like if Iowa was having the season that we dreamed of, the best case where they beat Iowa State and they beat Michigan State and they beat UCLA and they've got one loss, they're 10-1 going into Nebraska and they've got a chance to play for the national championship game. We love this format if that's the case, right?
For sure.
Because then we could win against Nebraska and lose in the Big Ten championship game and still make the playoff, right? So we would be in a position where we would say, "Oh gosh, this format's awesome," right? So my tug of war with it is like, okay, yes, there are these problems, but also like if I was in the position where my team was about to go play for a national championship where it otherwise wouldn't have, I'd be ecstatic, right?
But the 14 playoff with the portal and NIL and all that, the 14 playoff made things even more.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It just took that, even more significant percentage of teams, fan bases out of things earlier in the year, right? I mean, you just
so much earlier.
Yep.
I mean, after the Ohio State game, we would have been done, right? And we were mostly. I mean, we were looking back, we were mostly done at that point. But if they ran the table, the rest of the way, they still would have had a prayer, right?
They would have. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I mean,
they would have. They would have. It was an uphill battle, but they, with a 14 playoff, they were done after Ohio State, right?
I still think the 12 team. First of all, if we're talking about expansion, I think 8 or 16 probably would have been better. I prefer 16, but that's a discussion for another day. But Kyle, I totally understand why you called in and where you're coming from on all this. And I don't know that there's a simple solution, but I love bowl games. And I remember just like you do, getting excited about the Outback Bowl, hey, I even got excited back in the day when they'd go play in Tempe. What was that? The Insight Bowl or whatever that was called back in the day.
Does the Capital One Bowl and the finish there, how much does that matter if that's in the playoff area? I don't know. I'm not saying it doesn't, but like that's an iconic bowl game against an LSU team that had NFL players left and right, and but it was so meaningful because we were playing for something, because we weren't just one of two teams. But I agree with you, Corey. Like it's the 12 team, I think by and large has been pretty good, but maybe it's okay to just acknowledge that maybe this is an unintended consequence, and that we'll see a little bit more transfers, a little bit more opting out. And unless that system, as you guys so rightfully pointed out, is rectified, we'll probably see some teams that really don't care down the season, and that'll be hard.
And last thing I'll say, Kyle, and I'll let you go. I think to your point, the Capital One Bowl, it's now called the Citrus Bowl, and the Citrus Bowl is irrelevant for me to a great extent, to a large extent. Not that I don't watch it or don't cover the game when it occurs, but I was really young in 2005 Capital One Bowl, the Tate to Holloway throw, but that lives in the minds of so many Hawkeye fans. I couldn't tell you what year Iowa played in that Citrus Bowl here in recent time, because they played Kentucky twice. I don't remember if it was the Music City Bowl they won. I don't remember the score. I don't even know if they won the game. I think they played Kentucky, but I don't even remember.
20-17 in the Citrus, and then won 21-0. But they were not.
I do remember, but I don't remember because
they're not. They were not. Neither of them. Well, 2021, I thought was
part of it was because they were forgettable games, but part of it is because there has been less importance placed on bowl games because of the entire ambiance that is college football of the last 5 years. So, Kyle, appreciate you coming, me, guys. Always enjoy it. Yep, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Kyle.
All right, Blake, appreciate the super chat. So you want Iowa to make the playoff and get embarrassed? Yes, more money, maybe better recruiting. They were spanked in the last 2 championship games. I don't know why why do we always have to take extreme measures? Like, you want Iowa to go to the playoff. Then what happens in the playoff is a different discussion. So the options are only, Kyle, you either have to go home and cry to your mommy, or you're going to go to the playoff and you're going to get your butt spanked. Like those are the only options on the table.
If they have a 1 in 100 chance of winning a playoff game, I want them in the playoff.
Yeah, but my point is, we don't know. People act like we know if they go to the playoff, they're going to get spanked. Well, you don't know that. I mean, you can surmise that. You can suspect that may happen, but we don't know that. Just like in 2015, so we are happy that Iowa lost to Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game because I wouldn't know. Boy, my rear end would have sure been red after that beating at the hands of the Crimson Tide. Like, really?
Okay.
Nobody felt that after that game. And nobody felt it after Michigan State got their butts handed to them.
Yeah.
They were frustrated that Iowa had lost that game on one final play in the fourth quarter, and that game will always.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking. Yeah. And by the way, they lost. They didn't go to the playoff, and they got their butts kicked anyways in the Rose Bowl. So, like, does it make a difference? Like, you have a chance to get your butt kicked by anybody. It's college football. It's basically a professional sport. Like. I don't like this. The outcome of the game is a reason not to go. Like,
well, we've heard people say this, and I'm not ripping on Blake, but we've heard people say it about the Big Ten championship game. Well, would you rather go to the Big Ten championship game and get spanked, or would you rather not go? Let me think.
Yeah.
No, I'd rather sit at home.
I'd rather not watch my favorite team play.
I just don't get. Hey, everybody has a right to their opinion. I don't get that line of reasoning, and I'm not saying Blake's saying that verbatim, but because he's not. But he did say they were spanked the last two Big Ten championship games. Yes, that is a fact. They were spanked.
But I mean, I don't know if they have Tim Lester in those two games. Do they get spanked?
With Deacon Hill at quarterback, Deacon Hill and Spencer Petras at quarterback.
I'm here to tell you that
it would have been less.
Tim Lester would not have put Deacon Hill in at quarterback.
I do appreciate the super chat, Blake. I mean that. Tony says, Corey, when do you sleep? You've put a lot of miles on this week. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that. Yeah, so I was up in Sioux Falls and drove back, then drove down to Kansas City, then drove back this morning. And then we'll be here for this. Well, I am here for this. Then we're here for Wazoo tomorrow for the women. Won't be in Iowa City, but I'll be covering it here, my home base. And then, Monday. What do we have Monday? Tuesday, get the men. Yeah. Interesting stuff. All right, we got a phone call here. This show's going on longer than I want. Thanks for calling our Iowa postgame show. This is our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Who's on the line? Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, this is James.
Hey, James.
I just wanted to call and say, it felt like today's game with Iowa, like they played at least 3/4 of a game to me. Kind of felt like that third quarter, it felt like we were going to let Maryland back in, but then they tightened things back up.
Absolutely. Yeah. There were a few moments in that second half where, like I said earlier, I don't know if you caught the first part of the show, sir, but I made the comment that there were that long drive from Maryland, I think maybe gave some people some flashbacks to UCLA, Michigan State, because that's a Maryland team too. We talked about what's his face, their star wideout, whose name already escaped me, Kyle Felton.
Yeah,
Ty Felton. He's a guy who can make plays in the open field, and so you just worry. The one thing Maryland can do is throw the ball, and I think it really helped. Billy Edwards got dinged up. Of course, you don't want to see their quarterback go down, but. This was a routine Iowa win, but we've seen some of games in which we thought they would somehow figure out a way to make them routine, not be routine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was getting flashbacks of UCLA, Michigan State, and even Iowa State there for a little bit, And then going back to what you guys were talking about, when it comes to whether or not I would want to play for the Big Ten championship game or not. I would rather play and really and truly get spanked than to sit at home and not.
Agree. 100%.
At least we have the opportunity. At least we have a chance.
Yep.
Even if we try.
I believe that's that is a competitor's and a winner's mindset.
Now,
And a winning mindset also involves we're going to go there and we are going to compete and we're going to win. And so whether you believe or not, but that's part of that belief system is being a competitor, right? Building that confidence. So as a fan, you're not required to do so. You can enjoy football whether you believe or not, but you at least want the team. If the team is saying, nah, we'd rather stay at home, then you got a problem.
Yeah. Well, or like there's been some coaches from certain conference that have made comments about, well, we'd be better off not playing in the championship game, then we can make the playoffs.
Sure. Yeah, that's kind of a, extra scenario that could have happened.
That's a different argument too. That's not a non-competitive argument. That's that's saying I want to compete for the playoff, right? That's not saying I don't want to compete in anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
On one hand, I would agree, but at the same time, like if you're not out there to win your conference, then just straight up win ball games. Whether it's the regular season game, conference championship game, or a playoff. If you have the mindset of, well, I'd rather just sit this game out, to me, that's not really a winning mindset.
Well, the point is if you're sitting, if there's a scenario, for instance, if there was a scenario where Iowa was 8-1 in Big Ten play, but they were, let's see, what would that make them? 8-1 in Big Ten play and 9-2 overall. Am I getting that right? No, I'm sorry. They'd have to be 9-1. So James, if they were 9-1, man, I'm really struggling here. I can't do math today. 8-1 in Big Ten play. They were 10-2 overall.
Yeah.
There may be a scenario where it'd be better to stay home if you want to make the big leagues. That's the 12-team playoff, because a third loss would do you in. And, you might win the Big Ten and get in that way, but there's a better chance you get in with just 2 losses than going there, rolling the dice, going there and potentially losing. I think that is a different conversation to be had, because the goal is to play in the 12-team playoff. That's got to be the ultimate goal. And if you're better off staying at home, if you feel confident you're going to get in there, you don't control that. It's going to be, the cards are going to fall where they do based on what happens across the country, across the conference. But I do think that is a somewhat different scenario, because you're still trying to compete for the 12-team playoff. But
I will say I do still agree, though. As a fan, I would rather just go to the conference championship game, compete for the conference championship, and if you lose, then you miss the playoff. But I can understand making the argument that says you'd rather stay home because you're going to go to the playoff. Me personally, I'd rather see them go fight for a conference championship, because that, to Iowa, that is a national championship, or a Big Ten championship to Iowa would be equivalent to, Georgia winning a national championship in their fan base. But I guess I
look at it like this: like, why take the risk of, sitting at home and taking chances, for you to get in. Whereas if you go, if you were to have the option, right, this hypothetical, why not want to have control of your own destiny in that,
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah, and you're always going to try to win, right? You're never going to, and losing would never help them anyways. But my point is, as a fan, we can speculate what would be a better scenario for Iowa, but the players got to bring it each and every night, or you're asking for problems. And you ought to, you're a competitor at this level, you ought to want to bring it every night and every week and be able to play at the highest level. So, nope, we agree.
What do you think of the Ohio State-Indiana game?
Well, I didn't really watch it.
Or did you get a chance to watch it?
I just followed it. I didn't watch. I was obviously watching the Iowa game, but disappointed, obviously, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised Ohio State ended up kind of winning somewhat comfortably, but I still think Indiana deserves, if they win out, it's going to be hard to lead them out at 11-1. I don't know what the playoff committee is going to do, but that's going to be hard.
It'd be a travesty if that happened. I think it'd be because they're not going to the Big Ten championship game now. Ohio State and Oregon are going, as long as Ohio State takes Michigan. Yeah.
But I do believe that if they go 11-1, they'll get in. I know some people think that they'll be left out, but I think the 12 for a playoff committee and a 12-team setup to leave them out at 11-1 would be be a travesty. I don't think that'll happen. I just can't imagine that.
Also,
I
Minnesota
don't
went
think
up 22-16 on Penn State as well. So we're going to keep following that one.
ooh, that'd be a devastating loss in the state.
Yeah, it would be. That might end up being Iowa's best win at the end of the year, by the way. I saw this comment from Sam. He's absolutely right. That road win against Minnesota may end up being their best win of the season.
Well, Corey, I'm going to get off here and sit back and
James.
enjoy the rest of the show. So,
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the phone call, bud.
Yep.
Thank you.
bye.
All right. Iowa defeating Maryland 29-13. Blake, appreciate the other super chat here. Got to go watch Minnesota, Penn State. Minnesota up 3. Have a good night. And sounds like up 6 now, according to Kyle. So,
yeah. And Ole Miss also went down to Florida and DJ Lagway just a moment ago. So 24-17 over Ole Miss. So number 9 Ole Miss is down.
Folks, let's give everybody kind of a box score recap from today's game. Of course, we mentioned our RTI Threads player of the game, Drew Stevens, 5 of 5 field goals, including a couple of 50-yarders and a 49-yarder. Jackson Stratton, 10 of 14 through the air, 76 yards. His first career start, took 1 sack, no picks, no touchdowns. Jacob Gill led all receivers with 29 yards on 4 catches. Jarrett Bowie had a pair of catches for 15 yards. Addison Estringa had 1 catch for 14 yards. Luke Lachey, 1 catch, 9 yards. He's had a disappointing year. And I know it's a new system. Tight end involvement has been different, but he's had a disappointing year. And I know he's dealt with some injuries. But anyways, Caleb Johnson ran all over the Terps out at SECU Stadium in College Park. He ends up with 35 carries, $171. Gain total 164 is his official final stat line on the ground. 164 on the ground, a touchdown. Kamari Moulton, 12 carries for $114, had the 68-yard burst. Jazz Patterson also took the ball 5 times. Did not he struggled in those 5 carries. Didn't generate as much yardage as we were accustomed to seeing. Obviously, he hits the holes hard. Finished with 8 yards on those 5 carries. As far as defense is concerned, Iowa holding Maryland in check much of the day. The Hawkeyes, holding Maryland to 98 yards on the ground and just $129 through the air. Total offensive yards for Maryland, 227 to Iowa's 344. Iowa, as it relates to individual performances, Jay Higgins with a solid performance. A half tackle for loss, had 8 total tackles in the game, also had an interception and a pass breakup. Quinn Schulte with 7 tackles. Ethan Herkett had 6 tackles, including a pair of sacks. 3 total tackles for loss. And boy, I thought Max Llewellyn was phenomenal. He may be their next great pass rusher. Had 1 official sack, but had a QB hurry, and it was just really good. Finished with 2 tackles total. Deshaun Lee with 5 tackles. T.J. Hall with 4. Hall had the interception as well. And, just good stuff all around from that Iowa defense. They were solid today on the road, which was a breath of fresh air to see. I will be live with Coach John Patterson tomorrow. So, folks, check us out tomorrow, 7 p.m. Central Time right here on the channel. Kyle, something else to add?
No, nothing. We're good. You're ready to move on. You've got important business to take care of.
I got business to take care of. I need some sleep. It's been a very, very long week. So
it's that time of year.
Folks, if you want to help this cause out, because it's a cause that needs help, as it always does, you can do so a couple different ways. One, by donating. Another, by sponsoring. So if you know of an individual or a company that'd like to sponsor and advertise here on the show, please be sure you let them know where they can find us. The email is info@fromthehawkeyeofthestorm.com. I threw it up there on the bottom ticker. info@fromthehawkeyeofthestorm. And the other thing you can do is check out our super chat, or our Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. All ways you can donate monetarily to the product. And of course, we're here from women's and men's basketball postgame coverage all season long.
300 subscribers away from 10,000 as well. So if you haven't done so already,
subscribers. Yep. Let's get to
300 away. Let's get it.
Get to 10,000. Folks, for Kyle Spence, I'm Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Be sure you join myself and Coach Patterson tomorrow after our women's basketball coverage, which will start after the Hawkeye women hopefully take down the Wazoo Cougars in Carver Hawkeye Arena. We'll talk to you tomorrow.